Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Em. This is my colleague and dear friend LaShanya. And we are going to start off today in the way that we started off the last truth-telling session. As you may have known or read or have the future opportunity to read, the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission is committed to holding these stories with humility, empathy, and grace. And as witnesses to this process, we just wanted to share an opening commitment. And so I'm going to give you an opportunity to say, I commit or I'm committed. We will start back with you, and I'll just sort of point us around the room. And again, I commit or I am committed. I am committed.
I commit.
Beautiful. Thank you all. And we'd also like just to start in a way that grounds us into where we are right now. As you can see, we're surrounded by beautiful woods behind us. And I just invite you at any time today, if there's moments that feel overwhelming, to find something beautiful to attune to. I see some apples on a tree out there. If it's helpful to count things or just being in your body. And so I'm going to start us off with a group hum to ground us all together and regulate us all together. So I'm going to start humming. I've never hummed into a microphone before, but I'm going to hum, and you all can join me, and we'll just take a few breaths of humming together. It'll phase out, and then I'll hand it over to the commissioners. All right. Okay, thank you. Good morning. And on to the commissioners.
Thank you. That we're doing. We are the land, and the land is us. This land tells stories of the flowing Winooski rivers, of stones that remember, of green fields turning to red leaves, to mud, to beautiful white snow. But the land also holds the tears of children who were seen as less than human, children who were bullied and silenced in schools meant to nurture them and protect them. The tears of mothers who cried when they told they could no longer birth children because eugenics was once law in this place. The land beneath our feet remembers pain, but also resilience and love. Love for the rivers, the rocks, the grass, the cold. We gather here on Indakina, the ancestral land and unceded homeland of the Western Abenaki people, the first caretakers of this land. Despite colonizations, epidemics, dispossession, and erasure, the Abenaki remain, and their strength continues to shape this homeland. And we are here because our ancestors did not give up. Their courage, their prayers, their endurance flow through us still. We carry their grief, yes, but also their resilience, their vision, their insistence on life. So today, we honor the Abenaki people. We honor all indigenous people, and we honor all ancestors whose tears and resilience allow us to be here. Let this truth-telling be an offering to the land, to the ancestors, and to one another. May we hold each other with the same love that the land holds us.
Thank you, Commissioner Garces. My name is Mia Schultz. I am one of the commissioners on Vermont's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Thank you for joining us. We wanted to take this opportunity now to recognize our ancestors who have been part of our process. Their lives and legacies shape the ground that we stand on. We, as a commission, do not exist in isolation. We are held and challenged and guided by those who come before us. And today we are in a place that Sister Sankofa last called home. Sister Sankofa was a visionary, a builder, and a healer. Through her work, she created pathways for equity and opportunity, especially for Black and Brown Vermonters. She believed that healing our financial trauma was just as important as healing our hearts, because liberation must reach every part of our lives. She used her gifts to nurture artists, uplift small businesses, and insist that BIPOC homeownership is not just a dream, but a right. For that work, she was recognized often by her community. For us, it will always be remembered as an innovator of freedom. I invite you now to join me in calling her name so that her spirit may be present with us. When I say her name, please repeat after me. Sister Sankofa. Thank you. We also honor Beverly Little Thunder, who stood with us during the strategic launch of this commission and who also blessed us with her truth through this process. Beverly's life was one of courage, raising her children, protecting her community, standing with the American Indian movement, and embodying the teachings of her Lakota ancestors. She carried the dual weight of tradition and transformation, reminding us that identity is never one-dimensional. Beverly taught us what it means to hold on to tradition while challenging it, to live fully in one's truth, even when the world resists. I invite you now to call her name with me, Beverly Little Thunder. Beverly Little Thunder. Sister Sankofa and Beverly Little Thunder are not just individuals we remember. They are ancestors who walk with us in this work. They remind us that truth-telling is not abstract, it is lived. It is not embodied, it is embodied, it is costly, and it is sacred. So as we gather here today, let us call their names with reverence, and may their courage steady our hands. May their wisdom sharpen our vision, and may their love for community root us in the responsibility we carry to those who are yet to come. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Roderick Owens. I'll be the facilitator for today. I just want to take a moment to, before we begin, I want to share the working pledge that guides our time together. As we explore complex and challenging topics such as race, disability, oppression, and discrimination. Oh, the eggs, sorry. Let's try it again. As we explore complex and challenging topics such as race, disability, oppression, and discrimination, we collectively pledge to approach these discussions with a commitment to extend grace, humility, and empathy with each other. We recognize that we are all on both an individual and collective journey to dismantle oppression and discrimination from our culture and systems. Therefore, we pledge to cultivate dignity and respect, even in moments of disagreement and discomfort. We expect and we accept non-closure, and with that, we engage in courageous conversations with curiosity and an open mind. We dedicate ourselves to refrain from judgment, embrace active listening, and use I statements to foster open communication. In this space, we understand the platinum rule, where we pledge to abide by each other's unique preferences, therefore building better relationships and collaborations. We come into this with good intentions, but also recognize that even when we do not intend to do harm, there is an impact. We commit to prioritizing Act 128 communities and acknowledge that there is no such thing as a single issue struggle. Our lives are interconnected. We vow to treat each other, our stories, and our dreams and struggles with sacred care. We honor vulnerability. We embrace the spirit of co-creation. We affirm that we are the active agents of change, and we are committed to doing the work to create understanding amongst and with each other. The journey to collective liberation is filled with discomfort and painful truths, but the final destination is community where everyone can thrive together. This is a shared space grounded in the principles of this pledge.
Thanks, Roderick. Welcome, everybody. My name is Faith Yakubian. I use she, her, they, their pronouns, and I am the Executive Director of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I'll address a few accommodations and safety details, including when you can expect lunch, which will be around 12 o'clock, out in the atrium. And thanks to People's Kitchen for feeding us with their love and nourishment. To my right will sit or stand our ASL interpreters. To my right now is Virginia Clark. Crystal Hare will be with us shortly. And thank you to Crystal and Virginia for supporting our public's full participation. We are grateful. We are joined by members of ORCA, which is the Onion River Community Access Media. It's an acronym I wish I could say without reading. Most especially, Chris, thank you for being with us today. Sean and Zach, we are grateful for your preparatory work and meetings, along with Executive Assistant Ann Miller. Thanks to ORCA, we are live streaming and recording this event, which provides closed captions when watched on YouTube. We are also joined by the documentarian, Dr. Vandora Williams, and her talented colleague, Akila Dodi. I really hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. To my right on the screen, you will notice subtitles, which will remain on throughout the event. This is one of our accessibility goals, is to provide multi-communication, an access point of entry and participation. Speaking about accessibility, there are gender-specific bathrooms, men and women's, that are located outside the cafeteria along the hallway on the left. The gender-inclusive or gender-neutral bathroom is close to the elevator, which you will likely pass while you were heading to the cafeteria today. If you'd like directions to the bathroom, please ask a volunteer. They are wearing a yellow bandana. Clayton is sporting one right now in their hand. To the volunteers, Mary and Clayton and Araya, thank you so much for being here today. We could not put this event together without your presence and dedication. You're also welcome to ask myself or Anne for any assistance. To support our collective and individual health, we have masks that are available and hand sanitizers. They are at the registration table. They are also at the tables to the back of some of us, and please use them as you need. You may have met our great safety guards, Elijah and Dan from Chocolate Thunder. They are here to support our safety and uphold respectful spaces. Lastly, but never least, we have community partners with us today. And thank you, community partners, Racial Equity, the Office of Racial Equity, and the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are grateful for working alongside both of your organizations or offices. Please stop by their table to receive information and support from their respective organizations and offices, and they have been ongoing partners in the TRC. To the left of them is Aurora Berger, our artist in residence, who invites you to express yourself creatively and authentically at your leisure when there is a pause, of which there will be a few. One will last about 20 minutes, and we We hope that you will participate in the art project that we are creating. To the left of the art table is VTRC's General Legal Counsel. There is currently an intern, I believe, at that table. Welcome, intern. I'm sorry I don't know your name. You're welcome to speak with Michelle Overa, who is our General Legal Counsel, or their amazing intern about legal interpretations. Michelle and Abby Page, one of our honorary witnesses, are also here facilitating private truth-telling sessions. You can come find me if you'd like to know that room. It is room 120, but I do not expect folks to memorize that. There are support rooms scattered on the first floor. You might already know where some of those are located. We have a staffed kids activity room, which is near the stairs in the atrium. And thank you, Jessica Robles, for hanging with the kiddos. The quiet and low sensory room is located in room 110, and the private truth-telling session is in 120. But again, please find me or a volunteer if you need to locate those classrooms. We ask that people, oh, no, sorry. Lastly, I said lastly before, this is really lastly. We have water and tissues and coffee and fidget spinners and stars for squishing if you need anything to release energy that is stored up in your body. Your comfort and safety are important to us and this process, which is a great segue to the tissues. So there is a practice, we inherited this from an ancestor, indigenous ancestor, that a way to, and Melody, I might look to you just to help me out a bit, but a way to release that which is stored in our bodies, as a way to process, as a way to heal. You can use the tissues to wipe tears, or just hold on to a tissue. And then you can place it in the basket that we are gathering that currently is behind this pole, but I'll make that more available so that you can actually have a visual on that. Again, we have tissues located throughout this room. Please access them as you need or wish and participate in the gathering of tissues if you'd like. Commissioner Mackin, was that? Yeah, okay. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Commissioner Mackin.
Thank you. And it was Brenda Reynolds from the Canadian TRC who gifted us with that ceremony. And then we will be doing a ceremony to burn the tears as an offering at another time. So probably after all of our sessions are finished. And also, I just wanted to mention that thank you for Araya Marisa for being here for our historical research and for helping me with this. So I'm going to talk about the theme. It can be difficult to understand the laws and policies within our systems. Therefore, it can be very difficult to understand what we as a commission are trying to do. And so one of the ways we have conceptualized our own work is by examining what has been lost as a result of state laws and policies. So today's theme is health and wellness. We are going to hear difficult truths, and they are essential to understanding the impacts that our system has had on human beings that reside here and their families, past and present. It takes an incredible amount of bravery to stand up and tell your truth, and we are incredibly grateful to all of our truth tellers. What suffers when our physical being has been impacted? Our vitality, our energy, our ability to prevent disease, to sleep, our longevity, stress levels, mood, resiliency, social connections, confidence and self-esteem, productivity, success, and ultimately, our quality of life can all be negatively impacted by systems that uplift some and not others. Health and wellness are the foundation of how we thrive, but what happens when those are compromised? The history of this place and the people that have lived here is long and nuanced. As settlers arrived and met folks on the shores, these new faces brought with them diseases that ravaged indigenous populations of the Northeast. They also brought with them systems that were overlaid on the people of this land and had a very real change on the socio-political world that was 10,000 plus years in the making. Colonization of the mind began with missionaries, and warfare plagued the Northeast throughout the colonial period. And once Vermont was established, they created systems based upon what settlers inherited from previous places. I want to just share a few pieces of history leading up to today. In 1601, England established the Elizabethan Poor Law, which Vermont would inherit as its legal framework for aid to the poor and people with disabilities. This system considered poverty to be a moral failing and categorized impoverished people in three ways: people unable to work, people able to work but unemployed, and vagrants. In 1779, Vermont passes an act for the relieving and ordering of idiots, impotent, distracted, and idle persons. This stated that the idiots and the aged, the sick and the poor should be supported by their relatives, and penalized these relatives who refused support. Through this act, selectmen had permission to put individuals without other means of support, while the overseer could be placed in complete charge over all affairs of the poor and his family. Autonomy and safety feature prominently into losses created by this law. This was the precedent set for the system set in place when Vermont joined the United States as the 14th state. Over time, Vermont would establish poorhouses, Vermont Asylum for the Insane, later called the Brattleboro Retreat, Vermont Reform School, later rebranded the Industrial School, followed by the Week School, the Austin Sanatorium, Vermont Sanatorium, State School for the Feeble-Minded, later rebranded Brandon, Children's Aid Society, Caverly Preventatorium, Eugenics Survey of Vermont, and other institutions. For some Vermonters, these places were established to help people, but for others that actually experienced them, these institutions led to abuse and negative impacts on health and wellness, especially in the poor and Act 128 communities. The Eugenics Survey is one of the more dark periods of Vermont's history. The culture here was ripe for the ideology that supported eugenics and the sterilization law. The Department of Public Welfare, which maintained the systems meant to manage certain populations, records one sterilization in 1905, long before the legalization in 1931, as described by Mercedes de Guardiola's book, Vermont for the Vermonters. By 1925, Henry Perkins forms the Eugenics Survey of Vermont and plans to use records from the Children's Aid Society and the State Social Service Exchange to create pedigrees of degeneracy to support a campaign for legalized sterilization. They begin the survey in 1926. The impacts of the survey and abuses within the state institutions have created intergenerational trauma for many families. In 1937, Vermont Industrial School is renamed the Week School in honor of John E. Weeks, who was involved in the Eugenics Survey of Vermont and the Vermont Commission on Country Life. Weeks eventually became governor. George Aiken sets a commission to investigate allegations of abuse at Weeks. They found severe overcrowding, allegations of severe corporal punishment, and use of long periods of solitary confinement as punishment. Fast forward to 1986, when the Vermont State Hospital is decertified by the federal government because of poor care. It was not until 1999 that the Olmsted versus LC decision by the U.S. Supreme Court determines that unjustified segregation of people with disabilities in institutions is unlawful under the Americans with Disabilities Act, 1999. In 2005, the U.S. Department of Justice investigated the Waterbury Hospital and deemed conditions as dehumanizing and prison-like. In 2020, Woodside Juvenile Detention Facility was forced to close its doors 6 months following a civil suit that outlined the abuses of children at that facility. All of this led to we as a commission asking the Department of Children and Families what they plan to do to create a system for children that ensures their fundamental rights and inherent dignity, as they plan to create a new facility at Virgins. Our response can be found on our website if you want to take a look. Vermont prides itself on the distinction that slavery was outlawed in the Constitution from its inception, which is the first state to do so. However, if we want to understand our actual history and the impacts on our children and their families, we have to go back to the beginning and correct what has been allowed to proliferate that is untrue. Vermont only outlawed slavery for people over a certain age, according to gender. Indentured servitude for children was not outlawed until 2022. With such a foundation, the history of our institutions and systems that impact health and wellness should not really be that surprising. There have been measures along the way to shape better systems, but we are here today to hear truths from those still impacted, and we can do better. How can we create a new foundation on which we are all supported that allows all people to seek wellness and uplifts their human dignity? Thank you.
So we're ready for our first truth teller.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. You will have these books and these scaffolding. Sorry, I didn't bring mine. Spirit has me in a different place with an opportunity to send the cut and paste of what I intend to say right now to any of you next. It can happen in real time if you want your phones out. I don't want your phones out, so, okay. My phone is out because that is where what I want to say is recorded. Thank you. I brought my own tissue, and I want to make sure that that's the sacred basket. Oh, yep. I come here experienced in truth-telling and witness bearing and grief support to where we are and what we're trying to do. So I'm introducing myself. I am Opeyemi. People call me O, but my friends call me Dr. O. Now that's a cute little phrase, but I'm starting with what's real here in Vermont. I have been here off and on, working and living since 2014 reliably, working from Western Massachusetts for 6 or 7 years before that, working with social services, by name HCRS in Southern Vermont and up into Springfield. I introduce myself the way I do because the culture up here is so damaged that if I do not take care of myself, even in the presentation of my name, I will receive microaggressions. What, what did you say? I don't understand it. In one situation, I even got, what? You want to be doing business with a name like that? So I say, Opeyemi, and immediately cut it off with, people call me O. They can relax if they choose to stop being aggressive and we're just being clueless. I have given clues now of where you can go. And then I screw around a bit by saying, but my friends call me Dr. O. And that's where my story begins. Because I would describe myself as a wounded veteran, and I came to Vermont as a vet would come to Vermont for relief with a whole bunch of PTSD trauma, but an idea that I could hold my space here and be okay. How was I wounded? Well, I am a conventionally trained family practice physician, did that for 22 years of my life, crashed and burned very dramatically with a self-harming suicide attempt, spent 5 days in a locked psychiatric ward, another month in an outpatient program. None of that was in Vermont. That's just the general background noise. We'll get to Vermont very quickly, I promise you. That was my background, and with that background, I call myself a wounded vet because the battle trauma of holding any kind of a moral center in the conventional allopathic medical system as a black female doctor who from the get-go, meaning from college, I knew how bad it was. Most people didn't. A book got written in the last 10 years, but I knew this back in 1978, that if we didn't take care of ourselves, they would kill us. That was not figurative, that was literal. So back to the present moment. Here I am, a black woman physician. I did it for 22 years. I slipped and I fell. Oh my goodness, what did I slip on? Maybe it was the toxic environment of conventional medicine. Maybe as a 48-year-old woman who had balanced my family and my children, 2 of them out of this body, 2 more in a communal poly lifestyle. We're not going to get into how queer I really am, but the background noise was that I was in a system that when I slipped, it was like blood for the sharks, because how can she be competent to practice medicine? She tried to kill herself. And after 17 months of poking and probing and trying to figure out, is she crazy? No, I just think she's out of bounds, back and forth between the Board of Registration of Medicine in the state I was in, again, not Vermont, whew, all right? But very much like Vermont, all right? In that environment, what happened next was I had to really pay attention. And I had to say, this will kill me. I almost killed myself. Phew, let me get out of here. They don't want me. When they cleared me to be okay to come back 17 months later, having tried to starve me out in various very aggressive ways, I didn't want to go. So I spent the next 20 years, I'm 68. I spent the next 20 years trying to fill in those holes in between, the Swiss cheese of what wasn't happening that needed to happen, what didn't get said around sexual issues, huge, and that relates to Vermont. Hugely, we don't talk about that stuff. Spirituality, how do you make meaning of being ill or having trouble? Sensuality, why are hospitals so cold and it smells like alcohol and they never let you sleep and they're turning the, all of those things I tried to address for the next 20 years. That's what brought me into peer support for mental health issues, all right? Like war veterans who have to live with the moral injury of having injured others, as I said, triple peer. I am a parent to a child now 37 who is deeply institutionalized but doing okay in the eyes of the National Institutes of the Mentally Ill, the National Association for the Mentally Ill poster child, all right? But could be killed at any moment because they're a brown kid. When they actually had problems, it was in Kentucky, not Vermont, right? Kentucky, where they were under police escort and assaulted police officers after a mental health crisis, got out of the back seat with their handcuffs in front of them when the police had put them behind them because they happened to be military trained, and they only got tased and put in jail for 3 months, okay, in Kentucky. But if they were browner, or if they had been identified in the 911 call from the uncle, oh, he's having some trouble, can we get some mental health support? If he hadn't been coming from a white home in his biracial Lexington, Kentucky family, he'd be dead, all right, and I know that. So there's a part of me that knows how bad the system is everywhere, but we're talking about Vermont. So I came to Vermont, first issue is that the institutions and the culture of Vermont have been harmful. And it's complicated, I'm gonna try to walk people through. But my personal experience starts with the psychiatric care and that triple P that I told you about. Because as a parent, I've seen the places where my son was failed from the beginning. And the first was he was telling a story of sexual abuse that nobody wanted to hear. He's 37. We were not trauma-informed. The institutions were not trauma-informed. Nobody wanted to hear that stuff. In that situation, not Vermont, the issue was Catholicism. The whole system was heavily weighed towards social workers, et cetera, from a Catholic culture. Shh, we don't talk about this. Back in the day, nobody wanted to listen to his truth, and he is now poster child with all kinds of diagnoses along the way, but trauma was not one of the starting points. When I was working in the system, and I crashed and burned, I was not treated as a person who has breast cancer and has to go off for a while and heal, or a person who's had a heart attack. Psychiatric crises are shameful in the conventional medical model everywhere, and that includes Vermont. And where I saw it in Vermont was when I left that model as the MD and was in that model for peer support and doing lots of really, really good work. And I'm going to name healthcare and rehabilitation services in southern Vermont. When I myself took myself back into a safer place, Sandra Bland had just been killed. I was driving my little car, and a white woman in a van stopped inappropriately in the middle where I couldn't get around her on either side. And when she got out of the car, she looked at me and smirked. And at that moment, I had a fit of rage and could see myself doing real damage to that car, to that woman, or to other places. So I took myself to the place I used to work, which was in Western Massachusetts. It was a peer-supported, 3-bed alternative to a psychiatric admission called Afia, nice Swahili name. I said to anybody who's going to come and be staff for me, you all have to watch the full 9 minutes of the Sandra Bland video if you want to talk to me at all during this time that I'm going to be taking as a rest. So I rested well and deeply, and I went back to work, but I recognized, ooh, there's a little stigma there. I'm recovered. How dare I backslide? So that is everywhere, and I see that in the Vermont mental health system as well. There's still peer. We are still placing you. You are more recovered than you. You can't backslide. If you backslide, shame on you. And that is culturally Vermont, shaming behaviors in response to stress. Now, I know we're stressed, and I know that's what it is, but it's still not a good look on any of us. Okay, what happened in 2014 when I came back to Vermont to live? I lived in southern Vermont.
Here, just give her this one.
The mic cut off. Can you believe that? The mic cut off. So technically, just as I believe, I was starting to talk about Vermont specifically, and a thing that happened just like this. I came back to Vermont in 2014, and we were all excited about Bernie Sanders' single payer, and all of us had pushed really, really hard to make that happen. And then we were all ready to turn it on and be a model for the whole nation. And then and it was a Democratic administration. It was a Democratic administration. It was a Democratic administration. We did just like this. It was like the mic cut off. All of a sudden, poof, it was gone. So that's what I also see happening, is Vermont lets issues dissipate. They just float away, and nobody stays angry too long, and eventually it's not a seen problem anymore. That's not okay. That's not okay for my health. Who succeeded here in Vermont and who didn't? Because I didn't know until last week that Vermont didn't have a single all-white county until 1930. That was a statistic I just found out. And it makes perfect sense under all the eugenics and all the craziness that it took that long to actually squeeze people into assimilation. So who succeeds here? Jews succeed here. This is not, everybody don't get all sideways with me. I'm using the terminology correctly. If you came from Lithuania, like the other 9,999 of your people, and settled little Jerusalem up in in the Burlington area, you could succeed because you were in a small group and you were stable enough, long enough, that they didn't attack you before you could then assimilate. Are those people still here? Sure, they're still here. But I'm sorry, and I'll say this out loud, because I have relatives in this particular category. There's levels of what we used to call passing that I'm going to just call access to white privilege that I want to talk about a lot, because this is what breaks my heart about my own life and about why I can't stay here and feel successful, and I cannot recommend Vermont any longer as a place for other black women like me to retire to. I can't recommend it for you to come here and live with your family outside of Chittenden County. And I have looked at this really, really carefully. Right now, if I'm not talking about your children, I'm not talking about your grandchildren. If you want to succeed and thrive, it is not safe to come here and try to live outside of Chittenden County. And it is definitely is affected by the groups that also succeeded, but on littler ways. The second would be mixed race people did not succeed at all, nor did French Canadians. And I mean, look at it. Montpelier, that is a reflection. If I were in South Africa and we were talking about speaking the language of the oppressor, Afrikaans, that's a push into the face of a French Canadian person every time you mispronounce that, and that's the right way. Barrie and Montpelier, it's that deep in Vermont culture. So those are the people who succeeded. A few Italians, not outside of the North End and these two little fortress areas where you could build your community. All right. I say all of this from this is how I researched before I came here. This is how I knew what I was getting into, and yet, I witnessed while I was here us move from a commitment to one single payer that just dissipated into nothing. I went to a mental health visioning program that was talking about being excited about 6 peer support houses, each of them having 3 or 4 clients at a time. NIMBY, not in my backyard. So the next thing you know, that's dissipated. Oh, but we got 24 new locked beds because that's where the money is. And that's where the lobbying is still affecting all of this. I didn't count on that. So that makes me heartbroken, but I didn't count on that piece of it. And then the small p politics of what happened to me personally is I recognize that I wanted to be LVM Shelton as I aged. That is a black Quaker monolith that nobody has heard of because she lived quietly and peacefully and deeply and well in Plainfield. I didn't even know she had died at age 80. I didn't even know she was 80 because, I didn't know she was 80 until last weekend, and she died in February. Quiet black life. Shh. Died and thrived and died here. I wanted to be like Paige Bailey, except that Paige came with that, ooh, but did you know about her? And did you know, did you know that she was, because she died of end-stage renal disease, and how she handled her life and her choices had a lot to do with her renal disease. I say that because that's my mother's story. My mother was dead at 56 from end-stage renal disease related to the traumas and the dramas in her life that she couldn't deal with other than the tools we now call recovery, but we don't have access to them. And the blacker you are in Vermont, the less access you have to those tools. And that brings me to the idea of what is going on in this place where we're building a new prison. It breaks my heart that millions of my taxpayer dollars are going to a prison for women in Vermont where there's only 100 women even in the system. And that is personal for me because I was a medical director at a state prison for women. So I came here to retire, and I came here to settle, and I came here with an expectation that I would have a nice, easy life. So the first thing I found out was that Home Share Vermont can't hold people of color. Why? Because the old people who are needing the support or needing help can't handle colored equity. You always come in as the servant in the eyes and the culture. So it's very hard to place anybody. That I don't know how you fix that, because that's how it is right now. So I came in, and I was lucky enough to settle the first time around with an 80-year-old woman in the Putney area. She was a very progressive white woman. I probably saved her life because of being there one night when she had taken off a brace she shouldn't have taken off around her neck and would have pithed her own neck if she continued to move. We had to get an ambulance in. So there's this great potential, and I'm heartbroken that that's not available. I left the Burlington area where I shared short-term housing in 2000 and, oh goodness, when I first came here, 2018, here being central Vermont, or Vermont to retire, on a fixed income. I settled in the Burlington area, but I couldn't stay because of the F-35s. And everybody else considers that a little thing, or you'll get used to it. I don't even want to try to describe the sound, but it rattles the walls. And even when I go to visit, it is a challenge. I also have been meditating a lot on the inequities of what happened when I had to leave a housing situation that I thought was ideal. 10 acres in Montpelier, in a bohemian community of people where 6 lived on the premises. Problems got bigger and worse and needed mediation, and it was the fact that the mediator wasn't adequate to the task that I bring to the commission. And I brought my own support, just like you would have a seconds in a duel, and that's the second piece. I don't want it adversarial, I want mediation. But my second also agreed, look at the body language that just happened on this Zoom conversation. They have just turned off and can't hear anything more of what you want to say. So let's now talk about negotiations. The negotiations left me homeless for 7 months, but in the grace of how Vermont does sometimes work well for people who are low income, and I was low income, I got public housing with the Montpelier Housing Association. That is another place where at this moment in time, the problem and the harm that I have had with them has to do with the institutional nature of what is expected of a person who's low income, what is your right as a tenant or not. It turns out, as I have gone down the road to investigate several instances of overt racism in my housing situation, I find that there is no tenant advocate anymore. It dissipated somewhere from the beginning of COVID to now. I don't have time to be the advocate to make that happen again. I need those services. I started to understand how difficult it might be to get these services when I recognized the power of the old crony white male network. I was teaching an art class during COVID with another woman of color in the Northeast Kingdom by Zoom, an art class. The topic was Disney. We used Disney to show the cultural changes from Snow White all the way through Moana. A white male of privilege went directly to the parents of the children in those classrooms, these are middle school kids, to say, you don't have to send your child to this art class. You can have your child not take this art class. Just sign right here and they won't have to go to this art class. These two people aren't qualified or competent to teach the subject. So I want you to hear the double whammy. The double whammy. I'm an MD. This is an art class on Disney. The other person involved has a master's degree. This is an art class on Disney. That happened in the middle of COVID, so that's 2021. I knew by then that I was sadly in an environment that could be harmful to me and might actually be too toxic to survive in. I was so happy to have gotten off that waiting list and getting to public housing. And along the way, along the way, I tried couch surfing in one situation in North Montpelier. The white male in the dyad was so challenged by having a black woman in his bathtub. I watched this man freaking out, all right? I made it through 3 weeks of thinking, well, maybe this is, no. There is a statistic that I do not doubt, that 75% of white Americans have not met a black person. I did not say BIPOC, black and indigenous people of color, no. I did not say people a little lighter than me who can pass that paper bag test. I said a black person, a person from the African diaspora, or a person who was descended from enslaved people here in the United States. And it shows. And it shows badly here in Vermont on the social programs and the support networks and how easily Vermont is getting away with not having the cultural competency in the first place for much of anything outside of what that group, the Italian Americans maybe a little bit, Jewish Americans maybe a little bit, but the rest of us, no, not so much. I want everybody to just take a breath. Whew. Okay, so I came here to retire, and I came here pretty happy, but the bohemian artistic place that I thought I could be really useful at and do farming and didn't turn out to be what I wanted. So I ended up in town as an elder earlier than I expected. But I also didn't expect the lack of community to be possible. So I've witnessed people harmed by name, no, I'm not going to name, but by description, someone not get the social services they needed for the various ways they needed to recover from various substances and challenges. And there's a shame element, and there's also a shame on you element. And I want to speak to the shame on you element. The same people who are put on pedestals and we're told how wonderful they are gossiped about in our communities. And there's a specific kind of gossip that comes from a specific kind of individual, and we're naming that right now as being Karens, all right? But it means white women putting their noses in the business of people who look like me. And I just experienced in my housing authority an episode with my brother, who's 2 years younger than me. So we're talking a 66-year-old man. I witnessed be harmed by a white woman on the staff, question him repeatedly after hours at 5:30 about why he was standing where he was. All right. He was waiting for me to come and pick him up. He lives in Plainfield. He had come from the bus station after 3 weeks on the road. He had taken all of his stuff from the bus station to stand and wait for me. And this person not only questioned him, but when he told her, I'm waiting for my sister. Who is your sister? She doesn't live here. Walked away, came back, obviously, I think they're talking about this woman, came back, and as that's happening, I'm arriving. So all I got was the end of this as far as what I saw. But what I saw was my brother turn to the car looking terrified. Terrified. And I'm in a codependent situation I want out of. I don't want to be taking care of a 66-year-old grown man because his experience with all the racism along the way has left him where I protect him overly. But there it is. And I've seen that before, but there it is. And that meant I now walk around with a little card that I used to carry 10 years ago. How racist are you? And it has a spectrum, and there's one that's right next to the end of I'll kill a black person that says I will deliberately invoke fear in a black person. That was this person. She's a staff member on my housing authority. And I believe she knew what she did because she didn't show up for work the next day when I was in a position to do my angry black woman thing, which would have been inappropriate. So Spirit takes care of me because I now recognize the places where this is hopeless for me. It's not hopeless for the system, but that person needs, at best, training in trauma. And at worst, could somebody call her on her racism? No, 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 no. Even with that scale, there'll be denial. Even with that scale, there's hands over the ears. Even at that scale. So I want to speak about what I've experienced over 65, because Medicare comes into play, and you stop having Medicaid. So in some respects, Medicaid is better here in Vermont than the federal programs. When I have fractured my teeth, because that's one of my coping strategies, is to grind my teeth. And as a younger person, I got 2 crowns on this side and a tooth removed, and I have 2 more that need to come out now. But when I went to price it out, mine would cost me, my brother's Medicaid, $6 to remove his tooth as far as his copay. Mine, Medicare, $600 per tooth. Okay. I understood that Medicare was a sham, that I'd been waiting for the closest thing to socialized medicine we've got. That's what Bernie Sanders was always telling us. Now they call it Medicaid, Medicare for all. And it excludes, carefully excludes, the very things you start to need as you age. It doesn't cover any replacement joints. It doesn't cover much on your eyes, doesn't cover hardly anything on your ears. That would be Vermont helping with covering hearing aids, but the feds weren't covering anything for your ears. And your teeth, it's off the charts, because you can't get dental insurance that you can afford, and you can't get dental work. So that is a mess right here. I'm not going to grind my teeth until I have none left. As recently as last week, I was in a situation which I'm calling sort of the classic thing that has come to help me understand that I need to speak up all the time. I need to speak even with the projection being angry black woman. It's such a great way to just dismiss anything that comes out of a colored girl's mouth, angry black woman. And it happens all the time, inside the political system here and outside the political system. But in my particular case, last week, I was in 2 situations at the same event where I was walking next to a white or white privileged or white passing person, walking next to them. They were 2 steps ahead. They had a big box in their hand. A white male gentleman came forward to take the box and help them. I was totally ignored, walking 2 steps behind, with 2 boxes in my hands. 3 hours later, same situation of same event. I'm sitting next to a white passing woman. A white man comes up and speaks to her and says, "Am I in your way if I stand there?" And she says, "Oh, no." And he turns around and stands, and it's right in front of me. It's like 5 feet over from where she was and right in front of me. So I did something that I want to also share because it's humiliating. I took a deep breath. I said, okay, I'm going to deal with this. And I immediately got up and I took and put a chair where he could sit down. And then I went over to him and said, "Excuse me, but you're in my way." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, I asked you all if I was going to be in the way." And that's called gaslighting. And I want people to hear that too, because even witness, as allies, I can't depend on my witnesses to see the same thing that I just saw. And I'm not going to be sitting there convincing you that I just had a humiliating thing happen and you didn't even see it. That was this week. This week, I live in an apartment complex that I love for the locality, for my 400 square foot efficiency. Yes, I would like to wait for a full kitchen because I have no access to the kitchen. And the access to the kitchen in a building that has a kitchen, it's sort of a wink, wink, nod, nod. It seems like some people can use the kitchen, but other people can't use the kitchen. And that goes back to me just being policed as one of 3 black or non-white, not even black, residents in the building. Everything I do is seen and watched by 49 other people. I live in an apartment. It's the first time in my life I lived in an apartment. I didn't understand that really nobody wants to take care of each other. Nobody chooses to take care of each other. And the times I have put out something like, hey, do we want to have a buddy system? We had a fire, not a fire alarm. We had a fire. And some people are slower getting out. How dare you It's Vermont culture. There is a culture of stoicism, unlike any I have seen elsewhere, and I've been a lot of places. And I saw it worst with the floods, because a whole bunch of black and brown people came to help. They came to help at the top of FEMA as the administrators, and they came to help at the bottom as the muckrackers that were probably illegal immigrants or people who had not been sanctioned to work in the state coming to clean up. They all spoke Spanish in downtown Montpelier. Both of those, the racism outdid the need for help. In both of those situations, those people were humiliated. The white people didn't want to come and talk to the black administrators that were women about their FEMA needs. I saw it over and over again. And the people who came to clean the streets, big crisis, were told, oh no, this food is not meant for you, okay, in one of our crises back in first flood. I have to say the first flood, the second flood, or the third time Vermont had water problems. The first flood was critically an aha moment on what can and cannot work for me here in Vermont, personally. So I take a deep breath and want to just make sure I've covered the points I want to say, because that brings me to the present day. And in the present day of Vermont, I want to say I enjoy my life here. I am sad that I can't say to other black women, come here. I've witnessed people die because of lack of access to community and resources. And I've witnessed people's lives being cut short because of the toxicity of the background noise and the environment. And I witnessed one brilliant, beautiful, ebony black woman with a shaved head who, I will say, worked in this school, flee like Medea on the fire of the dragons and get herself out of here. And she is alive and thriving back in San Francisco. So I say with sadness, although I am committed to Vermont, and I am doing what I can to make it an accessible place for everyone, a welcoming place for everyone, I personally don't see it happening outside of Chittenden County for black folks in my lifetime. I'm 68. I would like to live to be 90. I don't think I'm gonna make it if I stay here. Maybe I'll make it to 80, maybe I'll make it to 75, but what they call weathering, that grinding of my teeth, those little things that pile up, that are still happening every day, are going to take me out. So I am saying to you, while I pledge my allegiance to this state, I am also looking as an expat to go elsewhere if I can manage it, if I can swing it, if I can strategically make it happen. I have two brothers. One lives in Vermont. The other has already moved from Los Angeles to Mexico. We are awake enough to recognize that the privilege I have from my white privilege that comes from the sound of my voice sounding white until you see me, and then they do all that stuttering and blinking things. I took care of that by taking a Nigerian name. I did not want my birth name to not identify me as, you're gonna be seeing a black person, so you better get ready for it, on this service position for my pedicure, on my getting my oil change, or on my applying for housing somewhere. But it is harmful to me in the long run. And I don't want to continue that harm if I can find ways of being in a better place. So I have my trip to Panama for a week to snowbird extensively if I can, and strategize how to go there permanently. But the very country that's been paying me that passive stream of income that I earned from all that work is threatening it right now. So I don't know if I can afford to leave. it is a magic bubble enough for me to be okay with my white sounding voice, with my MD that gives me status most places still, right? But it is not the average life for a black woman here, and I don't want to encourage people to put themselves in lines of danger. So that is my story, uninterrupted, and I'm open to comments or concerns from you as a panel on what else you would like to hear. Still not on.
Testing. There we go. Thank you. We always ask all of our truth tellers what they would recommend for change so that we can hopefully add this to a report at the end with recommendations. So we want to hear from you about anything that we could potentially recommend to our legislature for change.
While I wait for a generation to die off, you can put money and services into the youth and education. The very story that I shared with you about one white male being able to circumvent any school issues and go directly to the parents for boycotting a class shouldn't be happening. And the fact that 75% of the state that are white don't know enough about other cultures like mine, and apparently don't have an interest or are being described as not having an interest, needs to be addressed. That's health and wellness right there at its core.
And along with that, how could you find repair for you individually?
I am at a point where I want to say, sadly, I'm not sure that the out of silo unity I want is possible for me. So repair right now for me looks like help me leave. Seriously. And that's hard to say, but help me get myself together to leave. I tried to get out of this country the first time I saw fascism rising back in 2017. I had adventures at the Canadian border you do not even want to hear about. I didn't include them because that was Canada, that wasn't Vermont. But I don't see reparations right now. I see that if I live here, help me die here well. If I don't get out, help me have a good time. Paige looked like she had a pretty good time on her way out. I'm in the same apartment complex she was in. I do not want the magic Negro status right now. I'm kind of feeling a little hermit about this. Wounded veteran, I came here to rest. I haven't rested. I think I'd like to rest. Right at a time where they're looking at my Social Security becoming insecure. So just keep asking me that question as I'm here. How can we be of help? You got me a dandelion cup of tea early this morning. How perfect was that? Dandelion. Of all the herbal flavors that were available, it was a cup of tea to offer courage and strength and resiliency. So, thank you for asking. Keep asking. Thank you for listening. I feel like it's a hard story because it's so pervasive, and it's also so subtle. So.
We're going to take a 5-minute break before our next truth teller. You can take this opportunity to just stretch your legs. We will have beautiful colors of Vermont coming up. There we go, see that? When that ends, we'll come back to session. I want to remind you that we have an art table over there. You can start a piece of art over there, and still, if you run over, you can still watch the testimony. We love that we're all in the same room together. So we encourage you to check out the tables as well, with the Office of Racial Equity and NAMI here. So just take 5 minutes. We'll see you.
It was either that or mine.
Okay, thank you all for returning back to your seats. We're now going to begin our second part of our first truth-telling session, and after this is completed, we will have about a 20-minute break. So, thank you for staying focused and giving us your attention.
Okay. Should I go ahead and get started? Okay. Good morning. I'm Natasha Eckhart, and I'm just going to warn you now, I've already gotten emotional a couple times this morning, so I'll do my best to keep it contained. Okay, I won't keep it contained. I normally walk into this building wearing about 9 different hats, but today I'm just walking into this building as me. I don't, my only agenda is to tell my truth and not have any of my other hats kind of create what that would look like. So this is, I'm here as me today. A little background on myself. I was adopted at 6 weeks old by 2 white parents and came to Vermont at that time. So I was raised in Vermont my whole life. Grew up in the tiny town of Worcester, about 900 people. I think it still only has about 900 people. And when I was growing up there, my brother and I, to my knowledge, were the only people of color in the town. Definitely the only kids of color at the school when I went. And kindergarten was the first time that I was really made aware that I was different. I was approached on the playground by a kid who told me to go back where I came from. And I went home and I was like, Dad, this kid told me to go back where I came from. Like, why does he want me to go back to Florida? Because I knew I was adopted and I knew I was from Florida. And my dad had to have a conversation with a 4-year-old about that's not what they meant. They meant that you should go back to Africa. And I was like, why would I go back there? I've never been to Africa. Like, that's ridiculous. And he had to have a conversation with me that there were people who were going to look at me and think that I didn't belong because I looked different than they did. And him and my mom always did an amazing job of empowering me to be exactly who I'm supposed to be. But we're doing that within the context of an all-white town in an all-white state. And so even with their best of abilities, I spent most of my childhood and teenage years figuring out how to just assimilate and fit in. And I was lucky because I was much darker as a kid than I am now, but because I was biracial, I was still light enough, I think, for people to not see my color and just pretend that my blackness didn't exist. And so I grew up in a space just not even really being very aware that I was biracial, but it wasn't really a part of my identity. As an adult, I very much identify as a queer Black woman, but as a kid, I just identified as me, and my Blackness was not really a part of that. And when I came to high school, I went here to U32, and I had a great experience here. I was an athlete. I was editor of the yearbook. I was part of Stage 32. I was a very successful student. And I was able to do all those things because I assimilated. And again, wasn't really made aware, or my Blackness didn't really come about until we were learning very briefly about different parts of our history that impacted Black people. So when we were talking about slavery or talking about the Civil Rights Unit, then I became the token kid that was asked to talk about what it was like. And I remember during the Civil Rights Movement, I was like, well, as a Black kid raised by white parents in the whitest state of Vermont, after the Civil Rights Movement ended, let me tell you what it was like to be Black in the South. just so they could understand how ridiculous it was for them to expect me to be the mouthpiece for the Black experience. And the only time I ever saw myself in my education was reading Roots, or The Color Purple, or Huckleberry Finn, and Black people were always victims or oppressed, and we were always having to overcome something. It was never a celebration of what Blackness could be. So it was, and it was always really brief. You know, we had like 2 paragraphs in the textbook about Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, right? So I kind of spent my whole childhood and teenage years in the education system really kind of seeing myself erased. Or not, if not erased, at the very least, not even a footnote. And my parents, again, tried very hard to continually make me aware and provide experiences for me to have an understanding of Black culture. But when you're living that by yourself, it's all very secondary. It doesn't feel real. And I remember when I came to U32, I was one of 5 Black kids out of 900. And it was assumed that we were all related, even though we all had different last names. And one of my best friends, who was also a biracial girl, different last name, lived in a different town. Everybody thought we were sisters. We used to braid our hair when we ran track, and we got to the point where if we wanted to, we could have pretended to be each other, because it never occurred to people that we were actually 2 different individuals. They were just like, obviously, you are the same person. Or we would step on the track, and the other athletes would be like, "Oh, you must be really fast." And I was like, "We are." Like, yes, you might as well give up now, right? So it was just like, again, sort of these experiences of when my Blackness came into play, I was interchangeable with any other Black person, or what was the stereotype that I fit into. And I also remember being in art class and the kid asking me, like, "I noticed you don't date anybody. Is that because you only date Black people?" And I was like, "Are there Black people around for me to date?" Like, I was like, that's not why I'm not dating anybody, but there's no one, like, that's not even an option for me. So even though I had a great experience in high school, and for the most part, like, I really loved being here, it was microaggression after microaggression after microaggression, and just learning to kind of deal with it and brush it off. And when I went to college, I attended the University of Pittsburgh, and I was really deliberate about what I wanted to do. I joined the Black Action Society. I became an Africana Studies major. I was like, I'm going to surround myself with Blackness and like figure out what this means for me. Like, what does it mean to be me? And it was really hard the first year because I felt like I wasn't Black enough to be in those spaces, because I was so unsure of how to exist in what I thought Black culture was supposed to be. And I was surrounded by these students from all over the country, and it was so apparent that, like, DC Blackness was very different than Philly Blackness, which was very different than Southern Blackness, which was very different than the 5 boroughs of New York City, right? Like, and so then I was like, oh God, I don't even, like, so where do I fit in all of that? And then also, I was physically changing. I was very skinny in high school, and I got to college, and I went from being like an extra small to like a medium. So I went from like a 0 to an 8. An 8 is a very healthy size for me to be. But my white friends were all still size 0s. And so then, on top of trying to figure out where I fit in as a Black woman, I was like, oh God, I'm putting on all this weight, and I didn't know how to exist in this new body. and really started having some body image issues because my white friends continued to be very skinny. And that was about the time when I started dating this young man who was from Barbados and attending more of the social activities that he was a part of. And him and his friends were like, girl, this is how you're supposed to look. And it really saved me. Like, I think that if I hadn't had that opportunity, I probably would have developed an eating disorder. And I have some body issues anyway from being a teenage athlete and having to deal with that. But if I hadn't had that social group to help me transition from what white beauty standards were to what I'm naturally supposed to be, it could have gone really wrong. And so I'm very grateful that I had the social group that I had in college to help me navigate that. And then also in college, I decided I wanted to become an educator, and I was able to teach at this school called the Miller African Centered Academy, which was a magnet school in the Hill District of Pittsburgh. And if you know anything about Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh's one of the most segregated cities in the country. And the Hill District had its own sort of Harlem Renaissance at a point. August Wilson came out of the Hill District. Just so many artists and musicians and writers came out of the Hill District, and our students, part of our magnet school was to teach our students their excellence and what they came from. Because when I started teaching there, the Hill District had become one of the poorest neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. And so those kids only thought of themselves as the worst stereotypes that media put out. And so it was our goal as educators to show them how great they were. And working there and helping to empower those kids continued to kind of empower me and make me grow in understanding who I was, and part of what my role is in trying to help uplift Black excellence and Black voices. And then I left Pittsburgh and came back to Vermont, and taught for a couple years here, and taught in a very small white rural school district, only person of color on staff. And so took it upon myself to do very culturally inclusive education. Got a lot of pushback from the community about what I was teaching. I remember a parent came in and said the only thing that their daughter was talking about was the unit that I had done on Black inventors. And I was like, why is that a problem? And they're like, well, she hasn't talked about anything else. And I was like, well, maybe she's really excited about that, right? Like, but it was just really interesting that they were like, well, shouldn't you be teaching these other things? And I was like, here's the Vermont State Standards, and what I'm teaching goes with the Vermont State Standards. But I was always kind of getting pushed back on when I was trying to bring in any sort of culturally inclusive education. And I was also the kind of teacher that when I got called to the table for it, I pulled my laminated black card out and put it on the table, and I was like, I dare you to fire me. So they let me teach what I wanted to teach. But it just made it so apparent to me as an adult that what I had experienced as a kid all those years later hadn't changed. And so then I left teaching, went into union work, left Vermont. I was in Baltimore for 10 years, where I was raising my kids. I was in Baltimore during Obama's 2 terms. I was able to attend his first inauguration, and I was pregnant with my daughter at the time. And I remember standing there listening to him and thinking, my daughter's going to be born into a world where the only president she knows is Black and half African, because my kids are half Ghanaian. And as a kid, it never occurred to me that I could be president. And when Hillary started running for president, my daughter was like, but I wanted to be the first female president. I was like, well, maybe you can be the first female Black president. She was like, yes, right? But like, what a different experience my kids got to have than what I had. And I was standing there next to some elders who were just crying. And I remember reaching out and just holding hands with these women and just being in this moment, right? That we never thought we'd experience. And in knowing that like this is the world I got to raise my daughter in. And then Trump got elected. And and the Baltimore uprisings happened because the hearing happened for the Freddie Gray murders, and the police were acquitted, and Baltimore burned, and the national coverage of the city of Baltimore was buildings on fire and people going in and taking items out of the Mandawan Mall, and that's all that the national media focused on. But the local media focused on the church groups meeting with the local gangs and talking about how to rebuild the community. And they were out on the streets watching families go out and clean the streets and rebuild the community. And my phone was blowing up, and people were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm fine. You know, I'm fine." And I was like, you know, this isn't just about Freddie Gray. This is about people who have lived in crumbling houses with lead paint and unsafe drinking water, and their kids are going to some of the worst public school systems, and they have limited access to health care, and they have police systems that are not coming to them when they need help, but over-policing them when they don't, right? And this isn't just about the murder of Freddie Gray. This is about a city that has been systematically beaten down, and none of that is being portrayed in the media. That conversation's not happening, but it was happening at home, and it was happening with my kids. And the day after Trump got elected, we got a text message from our superintendent telling us that schools across the district had hate graffiti spray painted on them overnight, and that the crews were out doing their best to clean the buildings off before the kids showed up. I mean, the election was finalized at 2 a.m. in the morning, and at 7 o'clock I was getting a text message saying there were hate symbols on the schools. And, you know, so as a parent, I was like, do I send my kid to school? Is it safe for me to send my kids to school? And very shortly after that, I was like, I can't raise my kids here. I'm gonna bring them back to Vermont. Vermont's a safe place for us to be. You know, it felt safe for me when I was growing up there. And I brought my kids back and very quickly realized that Vermont was just as unsafe as living outside of Baltimore, just in different ways. And as where Baltimore like punched you in the face, Vermont is just death by 1,000 paper cuts. You know, it's just constant microaggressions over and over and over again. And microaggressions are disguised as performative progressiveness, right? In performative liberalism. And I was joking with somebody earlier that I say to people, I'm from Vermont and we're progressive, just ask us, right? Like, and we say all the right things, but we're not actually doing anything about it. And so when I came back, I thought to myself, how do I create a space where my kids can experience Vermont the way I experienced it growing up? Because even though I assimilated, I love Vermont. Like, I am a Vermonter. I love this state. It's my home. I came back here when I needed to recenter. It's my safe space. And even though I grew up in a very white community, it's my community, you know? And so I was like, how do I create that for my kids without them having to assimilate? How can my kids be their authentic selves in this space in a way that I was not able to be? And so I started really trying to work with the school systems. And and change what schooling looked like. And I went back into the school and taught and realized that, again, I was still the only token person of color in the district. And I was still the only person that was available to be the reference for everybody else about equity and diversity and all the things. And please teach us, but don't teach us in a way that's going to make us uncomfortable or feel guilty or bad about ourselves. And while that was happening, COVID hit. And I was quarantined with my kids. And while we were quarantined, the way that we interacted with the world was through devices, right? And social media. And social media was inundated by images of Black people being murdered. For running, for sleeping in their beds, for walking down the street, for trying to protect their kids when a fight broke out, for just existing. And I remember going and talking to the local police station and saying, here's a picture of my family. Please don't think that my husband, ex-husband now, but husband, please don't think that he's doing something wrong if you see him walking down the street. Here are my children. And please don't think that they're getting into trouble when they're playing with their friends. And I was like, and if you need me to, I will come and show you a new picture every time we change their hair, because God forbid you don't recognize them because their hair is different, right? And my friends were like, you did what? And I was like, I had to have that conversation with the police to keep my family safe. And and it wasn't just because of what was happening with George Floyd and all of that. When I was a teenager, I was driving home from a friend's house. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. And I got pulled over for being Black. And the police wanted me to get out of my car, and they wanted to search my car. And I refused to get out, and I refused to have them search my car because I knew I didn't do anything wrong. And I asked why they pulled me over, and they said that somebody had reported suspicious behavior. And I looked suspicious driving down the road. And they let me go with a warning. I don't know what the warning was for, because I was just going over my friend's house, but that was sort of, the beginning of me not trusting police, right? And seeing, what happened with Freddie Gray, and seeing what happened with George Floyd, and it just, this distrust of police has just gotten worse and worse and worse, and seeing how the chief of police and some of the officers in Northfield were racially profiling students in our community, and having to have a conversation with my kids that here is this entity that's supposed to be the people you go to if you're in trouble. And I said, instead, find the moms. Right? If you can find a Black mom, but those are kind of few and far between, unfortunately, in Vermont. But I was like, find the moms, because you can't go to the police and expect them to be the people who are going to keep you safe. And I had to train my kids that if we were driving and I got pulled over, to pull my phone out and start recording so that there would be documentation depending on if something went down. And if we traveled distances, I always drove. My ex-husband never drove because he's a 6'2" Black African man. And we couldn't risk getting pulled over because he was in the driver's seat. And we were having a picnic on the State House lawn. And I remember security guards coming out on breaks or whatever from the State House and the DMV and other state buildings, and being so aware of where every single security presence was around us. And it turned this really nice moment for our family, relaxing on the State House lawn, into anxiety and fear, Because all I could think, and my husband and I were kind of looking at each other, and we were like, if we get up and we move, is that going to make them think that we're up to something, even though we're with our kids? And so it's this constant vigilance of always being aware of where the police are and what the police interaction is happening. And when people talk to me about putting SROs in schools, I'm just like, no, like we can't have police presence in our schools. I think it's damaging for all kids, but it's especially damaging for our kids of color. But the fact that my talk, the talk that I have with my son, isn't just the talk about like, don't get somebody pregnant. Right? It's the talk about how do you stay alive? How do you exist as this beautiful young black man without being perceived as a threat? And when he goes and hangs out with his friends, having to have a conversation with his white friends about the responsibility they have to be out in public with him. And that if they're in a store and they're being followed, it's my son that's going to be targeted. And so they are the ones who have to pull out their phones and start recording. And that if they think it's funny and they start talking back or whatever, it's my son. It's my son who's in danger. And luckily his friends and his friends' parents are amazing allies, and they're like, tell us everything we need to know, right? And what we need to do in order to support you and your family. But that's a conversation white families aren't having. And it's a conversation that I shouldn't have to have with my kids. And it's something that weighs on my mind all the time, I don't get to go to sleep at night without thinking about all the injustices that have potentially happened to me or my kids during the day. And I don't get to wake up in the morning without thinking about what are all the ways I need to protect my family going out into the world. And that's always with me. And it takes a toll. It takes a huge toll mentally and physically to constantly be on high alert and constantly feel like you're having to educate everybody else on what it means to exist in this world as a black person, especially in a place like Vermont, where people think, again, we're so progressive, and we're not. and so it's, it's a lot of pressure individually, but it's a whole lot of pressure as a mom to figure out how to raise my kids in a safe space so that they can just be kids, and just exist. I remember when I'd graduated from U32, there was a football game between U32 and Montpelier, crosstown rivals, and U32 at that time happened to have a black quarterback. And kids from Montpelier put a cross in the football field with the kid's name on it that said RIP, kid's name. And there was all of this conversation in the community. And there were two sides, right? There was the sides that were like, the crosstown rivals, this is just kids being kids. He's the quarterback. Race had nothing to do with it. And then, of course, there was a side that was like, you don't put a black person's name on a cross and stick it in a field. And I remember having a conversation with my dad about it. And he was like, I think you might be overreacting a little bit. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I was just I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? Like, my dad is telling me this? My dad, who's been like my rock my whole life. And I was like, I'm not overreacting. I was like, how do people not see the symbolism of putting a black name on a cross and putting it in a field? They may not have set it on fire, but they may as well have. And he came back to me later, and he sat down and he said, I want to apologize because I realize I came at this from my white male perspective. Would you mind sitting down and talking to me about your perspective? I was like, yes. And that was so powerful, for him, and he was talking about, white fragility before white fragility was like even a thing, right? And like unpacking his own backpack. And but I remember later I was in a community group with the principal at the time at Montpelier and talking about it. And I said, what happened, I said, and the community's response is a failure of our education system. Because if those kids didn't realize the impact, and I think that they did. I think that they were naively believing the kids didn't. I said, but if the kids didn't realize the impact of that act, and their parents don't understand the impact of that act, then we are failing in our education system. Because there should be nobody who does not understand what that symbol means for the Black community, but just the community as a whole. And I was like, so what are you going to do? How are you going to do better so that something like this doesn't happen again? And I think that now we're still having those same kind of conversations. Like, I graduated almost 30 years ago, and I'm having the same conversations with school districts about what it means to educate Black kids. And not just Black kids, but like my Black kids don't need to be educated. I'm educating them at home. But what it means to educate white kids to exist in a world where most people in the world don't look like them. Like, they're actually the minority in the world, right? But in Vermont, they think that they are the world. And to think that 30 years later, it hasn't changed. And we're having the same conversations, and the same stereotypes, and the same microaggressions, all of those things are still happening. And it's so frustrating and so overwhelming, which is why I usually wear like 9 different hats when I come into this building. so I can help fight that. But it's just, getting people to think about what it means to exist in this space as somebody who does not live in a world of privilege. And I know that as a lighter-skinned Black woman, I hold a lot of privilege. I am ethnically ambiguous, and so I can exist in a lot of different spaces, and I can sit at a lot of tables that other people don't have the privilege of sitting at. But I also know that when I walk into a room, the first thing people see is the color of my skin. Doesn't matter how light it is. It's still there. And so trying to figure out how to continuously break down those systems and get other people to care about my kids and the kids who look like my kids as much as I do. And I challenge them too. I mean, I have said to people in school systems, if you don't actually care about educating my Black son as much as you care about educating the white kids, let me know now. Because I can spend my energy doing other things and advocating for him in other ways. But just name it. If that's what's happening, just name it. Don't pretend that you care about my kid if you don't actually care about my kid. And of course, I met with silence because nobody's gonna admit that. But like, those are the conversations I'm constantly having, and to be met with silence is just another example of erasure, right? I know there were some other things that I wanted to bring up that I'm missing, and I apologize. coming back, one of the things I did want to mention, going back to kind of mental health, when we came back from COVID, there was all of this energy put into social emotional learning and making sure that our students and our educators and our families were being provided resources to help them deal with the isolation of quarantine. And I remember having a conversation with my administration and some other administrators too about, have you thought about the trauma that kids of color are coming back with? Because during COVID, we couldn't escape those images. Unless we shut off our devices and we shut ourselves off from the world, we could not escape all the horrors that were happening to the people who looked like us by the people who were supposed to protect us. And I was like, and now you want me to come back and start teaching as if nothing has happened, and my kids to come back into a school system as if nothing has happened. So where is your trauma-informed education around the trauma that brown and black kids experienced during this time? We did a great job providing meals for our kids that we knew weren't being fed at home. We did a really good job of trying to provide educational materials and experiences for students that we knew were not getting that support in their households. But we didn't do anything to address the needs of our brown and black families during that time. And then when we came back, we still didn't address it. And I know in my school, when the insurrection happened on January 6th, me and my kids did not go to school the next day. And I reached out to the superintendent and the school board chair, and I said, are you going to put out a statement about this? And they went back and forth. I could see it, back and forth over email about whose responsibility it was to address it. And I said, Bernie Sanders, Peter Welch, Patrick Leahy, Governor Scott, they all put out statements. Just borrow theirs. You don't even have to come up with something. There's superintendents in other school districts. Just take their words. If you can't think of what to say, cut and paste, but put something out. And they never did. And what the superintendent did put out was an apology letter to the white families in our community, because the elementary school principal sent out resources to families to talk about the insurrection, which included resources around the idea that race was definitely a player in this. That if that had been a crowd of black and brown people, the response would have been very different. But because it was a crowd of white people, they were allowed to go in and have a full-on attack on our federal government. And they were met with little to no resistance. And there were families in our community that were outraged that that was mentioned. And their kids didn't feel comfortable, and how dare this information be sent out, and it wasn't fair to their poor white children because now they felt guilty about what happened. And I remember going to the school board meeting, and I said, can you just give me some thoughts around why you sent this letter out? And the superintendent explained why she sent it out, and I said, okay, so you sent out exactly why I thought you did. You wanted to appease the racist white families. Good, thank you. Thank you for confirming that. And I went on to say, I said, I reached out to you as a black parent and asked you to support my family. And you and the chair argued about whose responsibility it was to do that. And the principal of my kid's school sent out resources to support my black family. And you sent out a letter apologizing to the white families because she tried to support my black family. And I was like, so if this is a district that does not care about my kids, or me as a parent, or as a taxpayer, or as a teacher, because I was teaching the district at a time, I said, I don't want my kids going here, and I don't want to teach here, because I can't be a part of the system. And I actually, a couple weeks later, did resign, and my kids started attending the Youth 82 school system the following year. So we did actually end up leaving that community. But again, I was just like, here's a system that I asked for assistance, and they failed us. And instead, they protected the perpetrators of the harm that me and my family experience, right? And it's just like how I heard Dr. O just, talk about how it's not safe for Black people to move here. Like, and that's one of the reasons why, right? Like, we have these systems that have all of these resources. They have guidance counselors and social workers and nurses and highly educated teachers, and none of them are prepared to provide safe, nurturing environments for Black and brown kids. And when we talk about diversifying our workforce, I said, why would a Black teacher want to come and work in our schools? Because when they do and they show up authentically, you find a way to tell them that they don't match the culture of the school and they end up leaving, or you drive them out. And so, I kind of go back to Vermont is very performatively progressive, but when they're given the opportunity to put things in place into systems that could actually provide help, they don't. And so how can we create a diverse population if we don't care enough to create a space that they can exist in a healthy way, right? And in a safe way. And so the work that needs to be done is just to continue to train these systems on what it means to provide support for people who aren't white. What does that look like in the classroom? What does that look like in the guidance office? What does that look like in the doctor's office? My daughter went in for a checkup. Our doctor's amazing. I love our doctor. But my daughter walked away going, so the doctor basically was like, if I just lose weight, I'll be okay. And she's like, and I've worked so hard to be proud of my body and what I represent. And now I'm being told that that's not healthy. And that wasn't the intent of what our doctor was trying to say to her, but that was the impact, right? And I was able to go back to my doctor and say, hey, here's the impact of what your words had on my daughter. And luckily my doctor was like, I hear you, and let me process that, and I'm gonna make sure I do better going forward. But if my daughter's again walking into a place that's supposed to be providing services for her to keep her healthy, and the message she's getting is, you're not enough the way you exist, how are those services helping her? So it's just this continued education of these different systems, our healthcare system, our education system, our policing system, of how do we do this in a way that supports everybody in our community and not just the white people in our community. And I want to just kind of end with saying, I moved my family back to Vermont because I love Vermont. And when I think of my identity, I am a Vermonter. I will always be a Vermonter. And I would love to see Vermont actually be the state that it says it is and that it claims to be. Because then it really would be amazing. It would be amazing. And so I really hope, I hope that that's something that we can continue to move towards. Because I do want Black people to move here. And not just because they're adopted by white families, but because they actually want to be here. And so I challenge the whole state of Vermont to actually not just be performative, but put those into action, right? Practice what you preach. And let's be the state that we truly believe we're supposed to be. And be a state that everybody can exist in safely and in a healthy way. So that my kids aren't having to raise their kids with the same kind of mental and emotional and physical burden that I am raising my children right now. Thank you. Is that enough tears? Yeah. Sure.
Oh. So was there any response from the superintendent or anything when you left? Was there anything that happened? Or
No.
they just quietly?
I left, the community responded. I mean, there were, and I left for some other reasons too. It wasn't just because of that, but the community definitely responded with like, oh wow, our district really messed up, because the community had always rallied around me and my family. We did a Black Lives Matter sign making party, and a number of people showed up. People were putting in their yard. I think like 150 people showed up to a select board meeting to demand that they put an equity statement in our town supporting Black Lives Matter. We had a public forum with the police to talk about what policing looked like in our system. And two of those police officers who are now no longer there, unfortunately, they started their own book club, and they were reading the new Jim Crow. And I was like, I could get you some easier books to start with, but yes, so I think the community as a whole was really understanding about what was happening and supportive, but the school system itself never really responded to that. They have a new superintendent now who has been much more responsive. Now he's dealing with it from a transgendered policy perspective, but they're actually doing the right thing. So I guess there's been some growth since I've left, which is great. Yeah.
I guess, Natasha, thank you so much. Just recommendations for the state. Part of our work is going to be to make recommendations to the state in terms of legislative work, but think of it through all the systems that affect people. What are your recommendations?
I think that there has to just be, I guess, a couple different levels. I think more at the sort of the 30-foot view. There has to be training put in place for. And I guess I'll speak to the school system because that's a system I know the best. There has to be work done with our educators so that they understand how to create community within their classrooms, and they understand how to facilitate hard conversations, and they can recognize when microaggressions and harm is being done, and there's a way to do restorative practices without restorative practices actually causing more harm for kids. And then sort of at the next level, how do we train administrators to be hiring the right people to come in and do the work, right? And then also creating a culture where those people want to stay. But then at the higher level, and I guess this is where legislation would come in, things like the Act 1 and the education quality standards. How do we continue to pass legislation that holds an expectation for these different systems, a demand that these systems are going to recognize all of the people who live here and make sure that there are procedures and policies being put in place that are going to protect them. And I think especially with the federal government issuing all these executive orders and making all of these threats about what they're going to do, our state has to make an even stronger commitment to the things it says it believes in, so that when the federal government comes after us, we can say, this is in our Constitution. This isn't, these are our laws. These are the things that we as the state of Vermont believe in. And we're going to use that to combat the hate that's coming out of the federal government. I know that can only protect us so much, but I think just continuing to push that with an expectation that as it trickles down, it's actually going to be implemented. EQS is great. If only 6 schools are implementing EQS, it's only going to do so much, right? And that's a responsibility of the Agency of Education to go in and make sure that those sort of things are happening. So I hope that answered that.
What is EQS?
Education quality standards. Yeah. Sorry. In education, everything is an acronym.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for your attention and focus during that session. We're going to take about a 20-minute break. 15 to 20 minutes. Please look for me. And just for the record, lunch is after this, so if everybody's back in 15, it'll work out a little easier.
Okay. Hello, my name is Aaron Gardner. My Indian name is Sawata. I am Yakima from Yakima, Washington, from the Klickitat clan. I came here to Vermont when I was 12 years old. I had visited Vermont every summer since the age of 8 and spent good long portions of the summer here and learned to love it. At age 12, I was being raised, I was sent out here because prior I'd been living with my grandparents who were elderly in their 70s, and it was my younger brother and I, and they'd raised many kids already, my aunts and uncles that they adopted off the reservation. They originally are from New England, a white couple, couldn't have children of their own, so they adopted many children off the reservation. And then I had an uncle that left Washington to move out here for a love interest, and that's how I ended up here, was being sent out here to stay with him. Well, you lived here with him and his, at the time, 3 kids. Turned out to have 4 in the end. And during that time, after a few months of being here, he fell off the wagon and his wife left him with the kids, took the kids with her. And he was pretty broken up about it and didn't deal with it well and completely drank really badly and was not capable of being a custodian. And scared my younger brother and I a bit, and punching holes in doors and walls and blaming the loss of his family on the fact that I myself and my brother were there. So it's kind of scary. And I'd been through a lot of violence, so prior to this, I stood strong, protected my brother, and made sure that not a hand was laid on him or myself. And my brother and I got separated, and he stayed at a different teacher's house, and I stayed at a few weeks at one teacher's house, a kindergarten teacher, and then I think I went and stayed with like a 3rd or 4th grade teacher. And she was a track star and taught track. And coming from Washington, I was a track star myself, so we connected quite well, and I felt comfortable there with her. And I became friends with her kids, and I just kind of bounced around like that until they put me into a home that was my uncle's wife's brother. So they allowed that to happen because he was kind of like family and showed interest and wanted me there. And this is in Roxbury, Vermont, and it's a real small town. And Northfield was the school system I ended up going to. So I stayed there temporarily as a foster child, and he turned out to be wrapped up in falling to addiction to drugs and a drug dealer himself. And I witnessed things like guns being pulled on people, knives being pulled on people, people being shot at, trying to leave the driveway. And he was just a little out of control. It's a small town. Nothing ever got done about it. And there was one day when I was 13, he put his hands on me. And the history I've had, nobody was getting away with that. I didn't care how old you were or how young and small I was. And I got thrown across the room, and I bounced off the couch and used that momentum to grab him and throw him against the wall and put him in a hold. And from that day on, he never put his hands on me again, and was kind of surprised and respected me and kept the distance. But I was always kind of like, I felt like a slave, doing lots of firewood, splitting lots of firewood, not being allowed to go spend time with friends until a certain amount was done. And my friends would come and help me so that I get the chores done so that I could come spend time with them. I eventually went on my own became emancipated, and brought, I got my own apartment, put myself through school, took on the responsibility of my little brother coming back to live with me in Vermont from Washington State. And before I go any further on that, I'll say that when I first started school in Northfield, within the first month or so, we were coming from lunch break, and the doors, we were supposed to wait at some doors, double doors, before, with all the students, to come in once the bell rings. And once the bell rang, there were some students that were holding the door so nobody else could get through, and we're all piling up at the door, not being able to get through. The principal saw this happening from the other side of the doors and busted through the doors and was very angry. And he grabbed a hold of me and by both, my shirt, and threw me up against the wall and said that he saw the whole thing and that, how dare I do that? And I wasn't involved in it. I was standing there watching it. And I've done martial arts my whole life, because after the age of 5, I made a promise to myself that nobody would ever put their hands on me again and get away with it, that there'd be some sort of consequence. And I spent my life training and being strong and be able to handle myself in any situation in multiple different disciplines. Ended up having my own career in the ring, boxing and kickboxing, and became a trainer myself, training professionals and amateurs alike, and did quite well. Anyways, I did some moves, got his hands off of me, and threw him up against the wall, even though I was just a young kid, and he didn't expect that. He didn't react. He just let it happen, and at the end of the day, he called me into the office, which I thought I was in big trouble and was waiting for it, nervous all day. And when I got there, he actually apologized to me and said that he'd get to the bottom of what had actually happened and that he misunderstood what had happened and felt very sorry and wanted to know if there was anything he could do for me, and that he'd try to be more aware. And he really respected me and became quite an advocate for me in the years to come. And there was one other incident that we had, but we'll get to that. Well, I dealt with a lot of, when I first came to Northfield, I dealt with a lot of bullying in school, upperclassmen, star athletes that picked on me, racial names, called savage, or an Indian with his head cut off when I played basketball. I've been called Spicanese, I've been called Taco, I've been called Tonto. The list goes on. There's ones that I probably shouldn't repeat, and I won't. And I was really unsure about coming here to begin with, because there's a lot of pain, hurt, scary things, and anger that I've moved on in life and felt that I needed to grow past about what I'd been through and what happened. Even though sometimes it still happens, I deal with it in a different way. So it's been better for me and my soul to view it differently, so to come back to this place in my life and talk about it brings a lot of memories and things I've tried to escape. So I was quick to punch people and fight them for calling me names or walking up behind me and going, and I didn't care if you were one of the star athletes or the star goalie player of the school. And sports ran really strong in Northfield, and you got a lot of respect for the people that played sports. And I was suspended for knocking out the star athlete of the school, and he almost never got in trouble. Like, anything he did was gold and looked the other way. But this time they suspended me. They also suspended him as well, so we were both suspended. So I felt like I was seen, at least there, where they didn't give him a get-out-of-jail-free card that one time. And so the fact that I did that to the school bully and athlete, I got a lot of support from students that changed their ways of thinking and treating me different. They treated me with a lot of respect, that I was somebody that was going to stick up for the weaker people and accepting and open to everybody, and I cared. And but I also saw that playing sports got me a lot of respect, and people. I didn't have people that came to my games. I used to have to walk from Roxbury to Northfield and back for practices. I often didn't get dinner because of that, because I wouldn't ride the bus home so that I can play the sports, and sports became my escape. And I became a star athlete and well known. And people, it's where I found love by other people, and acceptance is that I was the best at everything I did, and they would come there and accept me and treat me like someone special, even though after the game, everybody had their family to congratulate them, hug them, and ride home. I'd hitchhike. I'd walk in the dark. I wouldn't even try hitchhiking. Someone would eventually pick me up, but I just knew that it just hurt my feelings to hitchhike and have people go by me time after time, because I was dark-skinned and long black hair, that nobody's going to pick me up. And until someone goes by that recognizes me, they'll pick me up. But it was futile to try otherwise. So to save my own feelings, I just didn't bother putting my thumb out, just so I didn't have to be disappointed. When I took on my brother, taking care of him, I was just a kid myself. And at the time, the townspeople were trying to take him away from me and revolting against it and saying that it shouldn't be allowed, and having to constantly go to court and fight for it, and scared that I was going to lose him, not knowing from 1 week to the next if I was going to be able to feed us, if I was going to be able to keep the apartment that we were staying in, or if they were going to take him from me and separate us. And he'd show his fear, like, are we going to be okay? And, I'm scared, and I'd always good at being the rock, putting a smile on my face and being cool as a cucumber, and tell him, like, we're good. I got this. I'll always get the answers. I'll always take care of this. We're fine. And he'd get a big smile on his face, and he'd believe it. And that's what I needed him to do, so he could continue to be a kid and not have to worry about adult stuff, even though I shouldn't have been either. But in the courts, I didn't know at the time that there was a law called the Indian Child Welfare Act that didn't allow my brother and I to be adopted or go stay with another family. And at the time, I didn't realize that this law was also passed because of my grandmother's sister, who I hadn't met yet, went to D.C. when she was younger to fight to have this pushed forward, and was part of the group of the people that pushed for this law to happen. That she's the one that, even 3,000 miles away, saved my brother and I from being separated, and we're able to stay together. And as much as my story hurts, I love that I have it, that I had the strength to hold my brother and I together through it all and not become as broken as I could have been. So I ended up going to building trades, vocational school, because I could see that it was a struggle just to get through school, high school, the college, as much as other teachers and faculty would say that I was promising candidate to go to school and further my education. I knew that there's no way I could do it while taking care of him and myself. So I said, I'll learn a trade. And I went to that school, and the instructors over time openly admitted that they felt like I didn't belong there, that I should go back to where I belong, the other school, and that I didn't fit in. And I didn't have parents to buy me the tools and the tool pouch and all the things that I needed, so I was always lacking something and needing to borrow it from another student. And instead of providing me with it or helping me, they'd mock me for, oh, you don't have that? Why don't you have that? See, you don't even belong here. You shouldn't even be here. And I was always ridiculed for the work I did, never got credit for it. Well, their teacher's pet, the star student in their eyes that could do no wrong, felt for me. And he says, let's try this for the next couple of weeks. And everything that I did, and they kind of let the class run itself at times, and I'd come up with ideas in a process of doing things on the projects, from building a house from the ground up, every aspect of it. And for 2 weeks, at the end of the day, this student would take the credit for what I did and say, yeah, I did this. And the instructors would be like, oh, what a wonderful job, and give him a pat on the back and tell him why he's the best student in the class and why they let him be the leader. And after that 2 weeks in front of the class, before the day got started, he goes to the instructors, and he goes, I want you to know this, that for the last 2 weeks I've been taking all the credit for someone that you guys never look at and give a chance and don't give him credit. And it's Aaron, myself, that's been doing everything that I taking credit for, and you guys praise me, but anything he does, you don't give him credit for. And they just sat there in silence for a while, processing that, and it kept them quiet for a bit. But the instructor openly said that he was going to break me and send me back. It wouldn't stop until I quit and went back. And then one of the rules in class, while we're writing in our journals before we start our day, is that there's no eating, no food during this in class. And every student in that class was eating. They rarely did anything about it. I had my lunch sitting on the corner of my desk, and I was not eating it, I was not touching it, and I'm writing in my journal. And the instructor comes over, gobs it up, punches it, and then walks to the front of the class and winds up like he's throwing a baseball and throws it into the trash as hard as he can. I look around, I see everybody else putting chips and crackers and granola bars in their mouth, and they all stop, and they stop chewing, and they're kind of confused, like what just happened, because I wasn't eating, they were, and I'm the one getting in trouble. I walked up, took my lunch out of the trash and walked out to the other room to put it in the locker. And I came back to class, and he sits there and looks at me, goes, go get that lunch and put it back in the trash where I put it. I said, nope, not gonna happen. It's somewhere safe. He says, go do it now, or you are going to go to the office. I said, no, the lunch is gonna stay where I put it. And I looked at him because of everything I've been through and did not hesitate. He was a big man, tall, like 6'4", and I looked right him square in the eyes and I said, you're not man enough to take me to the office. I'm going to sit right here. And he continued to run his mouth and say some awful things. And I stood up through my desk, and it was one that the chair was attached to it, so it made a lot of noise, and I threw it across the room. All the kids just opened up like the Red Sea. They all moved their chairs and desks out of the way. And I walked up to him. I said some choice things, got in his face, and said, now I'll take myself to the office. And I went to the office, and the instructor tried to have me expelled. He went to the superintendent, and the superintendent came to me and says, I do not want to see you expelled. I think you're a great kid. He goes, you always looked out for my son in soccer and helped him with his game, taught him to be a better player, and taught him, like put your wing over him, took care of him, and now he's flourished, he's got confidence, and this is because of the help you gave him and the chances you gave him. He goes, if you just leave this school and go back to the other school where you're coming from, it won't go on your record. You'll just have to repeat the year. And I said, okay. And I mulled it over, like, do I want to be expelled, have that on my record? I guess probably not, and I guess I'll take that deal. Well, the instructor of the class met with the principal, and I guess he and his wife used to go to dinners with my principal and his wife, and they were considered friends. And he griped on one of the meetings that they had that the parents were supposed to be present at while this was happening, with the teachers and everybody, all the faculty involved, the authorities, and he was beside himself that he said that, Kent, I don't know what you did, but when I went and talked to your principal and told him what you did and the way you behaved and the things you said, he actually took your side and said, oh, okay, so Aaron did those things? So what'd you do to piss him off? And he stuck up for me and said that I would never behave like that unless you did something wrong, that he's dealt with me for years and knew that, yeah, I might react big, but it's because I've held my patience and my tongue and my actions for a long time until I finally snap. And he knew that about me and stuck up for me. The only other incident that I had, and I get we're all human, but it's hard to navigate how to deal with somebody that has no parents. And my brother is my responsibility, and I was his guardian. And he was in trouble for using the N-word with the other kid of color in our school. But it wasn't like kind of like a code between him and that kid where the kid got to call my brother, "Hey, what's up, Navajo?" Which we're not Navajo, but it's an insult. It's derogatory. And my brother said, "Yeah, what's up, my N-word," as friends. But they wanted to suspend or expel my brother over this. The other kid did not get in trouble for what he said. And they brought me into the office and tore into me as if I was the one who did it and did not treat me like a parent. And I was furious about how I was being talked to and talked down to. And I, got up and yelled back that this is not how you would treat a parent. And if I'm going to be held responsible for him as a parent, you need to hear me and respect me as a parent. And you're not doing that. And I walked out of his office, and I slammed the door behind me as hard as I can. Big 3-inch thick door, and it had glass that was not supposed to break. It had wire in it and not supposed to shatter, break proof. And it shattered, and I felt really bad about it. It scared everybody else, and secretaries in the office and stuff. And it startled me too, because I wasn't expecting it. Didn't know that it was possible to break it. And he came out after I'd walked down the hall and said, "That's a $300 window." And I was like, "Send me the bill." And nothing ever became of it. We never talked about it again. He didn't send me the bill, so I think he knew that we were both wrong there, and all was forgiven. But it's still an experience that I had. Well, later on, I got into some legal trouble with a girlfriend, my first love, which we are now friends on Facebook, and we get along and have apologized to each other that we're young and foolish for our antics and didn't know any better. But she was older. I was still in school. She had gone on to work and left me for someone that was at work but was cheating, and ended up taking everything I owned and eventually bringing it back. But she caused some trouble and got me into some legal trouble, which she eventually came forward and said that it wasn't true. And but leading up, in between, the Northfield PD picked me up, and I was 18 years old, and they put my brother, who was 13 years old, in another cruiser. And when they brought me to the station, the talk that my brother had to listen to is that they were so happy that they finally somehow got me in trouble, and that they've been waiting years to do this to me. And I'm like, "You've been waiting," like when it got to me, I was like, "You've been waiting for this since I was like 12 years old to lock me up, to get me for something?" I'm like, "I'm just a kid, and I'm still in school. Like, why do they feel this way about me? What did I do?" It was pretty scary for my brother, and to hear that they were so eager to make my life and turn it upside down. And they let my brother come in to say goodbye. Well, they had me locked to a bench in the barracks, and they weren't there to watch my brother say goodbye, but I could see the fear in his face. And he was really upset, and he didn't know where he was going, and I didn't know where he was going, and he was really worried about me. And I said, "I'm okay. I've got this," just like I've always said. And he didn't look very convinced. But so to show him, like, "I'll prove it. Here, you know how fast I am. I'm the fastest kid in school, fastest kid in the state of Washington, breaking track records." I slipped out of the cuffs with one hand, showed him, like, "See, I can leave here anytime I want, but I'm not going to." And I put my hand back in. "So this is my choice. So just know I'm okay." And he got the biggest smile on his face, and he left happy. So, moving on from that incident, I eventually left Northfield and moved up to Morrisville. And it was winter time. I was a pool player, and I went to a bowling alley up there that's not there anymore, shot some pool for hours, and then meeting up with my roommates that had the vehicle, because I was walking, and I had a long leather trench coat to keep me warm, lambskin with a nice black case for my pool stick. Took pool pretty serious back then. And I go wait for them at McDonald's while they order their food. And I don't eat fast food. I haven't since graduating high school. I refused to get McDonald's or Burger King. And so I didn't get any food. I was just waiting there. And we've only lived there for a couple months. And I get in the vehicle with them, and we get to about a quarter mile down the road. And we come to a stop at the stoplights, and as we start to pull away, the blue lights go on. And the rider jokingly says, "Oh, they know you're here. What'd you do this time?" And I laugh, chuckle, like, they're not here for me. I'm just a passenger. You're driving. What'd you do? Did you not come to a complete stop? And we're trying to figure out what he did wrong. And they had guns drawn, yelling at us to put our hands on the dashboard. And I was like, "Geez, you really messed up this time. What'd you do?" And he goes, and so come to find out, they're talking to me. And they want to know what's in my pool case. What's in the case? Who are you? What's in the case? I go, "It's a pool cue." They go, "It's a what?" "It's a pool cue." They go, "Pool cue? What the hell is that? What do you do with it?" I go, "You shoot pool with it." They're like, "Out on the ground, out." And I go like, "Whoa, no, you. And they open it up, and they're all worried because I just said the word shoot. And and they open up and like, "Oh, it's a pool stick." I'm like, yes, it's a pool stick. And I came close to getting my butt shot for playing pool and being a brown-skinned guy with long black hair. And I said, "What was this all about? Why did you do this?" And they're like, "Oh, there are people that were scared at McDonald's. They called it in. They thought you were a hitman with a gun on your back. And so, we had to look into it, and that's why we pulled you over." I just like, wow, okay. So, like I'm early 20s. I'm younger than my son that's sitting over here behind me. And it's a lot to deal with. So I learned that I had to be careful around PD, that I had to consider whether I wanted to come off confident or water myself down and not be so confident and look so strong that I don't want attention, that I don't want to. I had to consider like how do I want to represent myself? How do I look least threatening? When I get pulled over in the future, I got so many stories. And I just wonder, does everybody get asked when they get pulled over? Is it common to be asked, like, "Have you ever been arrested for assaulting a police officer?" And I get that every time. And I'm wondering, is that what everybody gets asked for? Is that protocol to ask every person you pull over, "Have you ever been arrested for assaulting a police officer?" I probably got a dozen stories or more for here in Vermont about the way I've been treated by authorities. Now, there are a lot of stories in court that, like I fought tooth and nail for one of my kids where the mother constantly did things to keep him from me, and she knew that every time she made something up, there's a long process. It could take months of me not being able to see him because she made a complaint, and that had to go through a court system and usually repeated hearings before I eventually get my rights back again to be able to see him. And then when that happens, she'll come up with something else. And she was being abusive to my son, and nobody would listen to it. And there were times that he did come and stay with me and didn't go back home with her because of the abuse. And I'd get DCYF involved, and then they would come. And I just had visitation. I didn't have like full rights to him as custody, so she could take him back at any time. It felt like when she wanted to. And DCYF said, "Well, he's with you now, so he's not in threat. There's nothing we need to do." And I would say, "Well, he could be taken at any time, at any whim." And she will, the second, because I'm still having to pay child support even though he's staying with me. And the second that I take it to court to try to change it, she's going to take him back and do something to get me in trouble, so I can't have him. And she would every time, so I knew that the way she worked the system. And whenever she didn't let me see him, I'd go to the authorities, to the cops, and they'd put their hands up like, "We can't help you. This is not our, this isn't what we do. That's civil or probate. You need to take it to the courts." But when the tables are turned, they would come in force for her. And they showed up at my son's school when she decided she wanted to take him back. and scared him and told him that if he were to go home with me, that I was going to be arrested and thrown in jail, that he would not be allowed to go with me, even though that's what he wanted to do. And I went to the police chief and told him about what was being said and how they dealt with that, and that my son was scared to come back home with me. And the police chief said, no, you must be understanding it wrong. That's not allowed. They would never do that. My officers don't behave like that. They know the laws, and they would never do that, even though they did. And the person I was renting the basement from, they were there because our kids were in the same grade. She was there picking up her son and tried to intervene and pick my son up too, and saw and witnessed how the officers were and the things they had to say and how it was wrong and illegal with what they were doing. And this happened quite regularly throughout my life. Another time, she had made a complaint and got a temporary restraining order put on me. And I went to her current boyfriend to get my car worked on that was over the border into New Hampshire while she was in Vermont. And she called me, and I didn't answer, and she left a voicemail asking me to come over so she could do sexual favors to me. I won't say exactly what she said, but she had it on the voicemail, and I have proof of it, and I refused to go do it. So she called the cops, said that I was there banging on her door, scaring her, and my son, my son was scared to death of my behavior, that I was there, and I ended up getting arrested. Her boyfriend came forward and spoke, and the time frame of when she said that I was there and where I was at the garage in a different state with the boyfriend saved me. And he made a statement, proved that I wasn't there, and then I had the voicemail to show that she was breaking the order and contacting me. The prosecution still tried right up to the final court hearing, seconds before I take the stand, trying their best to scare me that if I don't take a plea, that they're going to throw the book at me and come at me, and I'm going to be doing time, and this charge is going to follow me for the rest of my life, and that the best thing for me to do is take this plea, and that I won't have to do time, and trying to scare me into doing it. And I said, I refuse. Like, no, I'm not doing it. I will not take this plea. And then my case is called. I stand up. I start walking to the desk. I'm ready to tell my story. I got so much I want to say, so much pent-up anger about how I'd been mistreated and the embarrassment that I had to go through. And the prosecutor stands up. No, we're dropping this. We're dismissing this. We're not going further on this. And they're like, okay, you can go, Mr. Gardner. And I was like, I want to talk. And they're like, no, it's over. It's done. They've let it go. But like, so I don't get to be heard? They're like, no, there's no need. It's done. I go, you guys have really affected my life and ruined things in my life for nothing. And I get things I want to say. I want to have heard on this person that's caused this to me. And they're like, no, sorry, there's no need. And I just couldn't believe how people could just make something up and ruin your life and change it and have such an effect with something that you never did. And and having that happen over and over again throughout my life, it's like, there is a part of me that does live in fear. There is a part of me that is angry. There is a part of me that is always skeptical and wondering what somebody else's motives are. Even when they're kind, I wonder, like, what do they got to gain? And I don't like feeling this way, and I really tried to live my life different and get away from these things. And later on in life, distance myself from a lot of these things that have happened. I got married a second time, and she was from Brazil, and we're working on getting her green card. And her son, my stepson, was 10 years old at the time, and they both went in to speak to the person up in up further north here in Vermont. And it was going really well for them. And the woman was very pleasant to them, treating them very kind. And they got to be heard and listened to before they called me in. And when I got called in, the energy shifted drastically. Even the 10-year-old later said, "Mom, they don't like him. Like, they got a problem with him." I felt it, and she was mean to him and really hard on him. And she did. She came at me hard, asking me all sorts of questions and really going at me hard when I didn't know them. And a lot of things that, like, there are things I don't even remember in my first marriage that if you had asked me the same question, I don't even know. And I'm still really good friends with my ex-wife and go to all the family gatherings. And I still wouldn't be able to give you these answers that they're asking me. And so I was flagged. And there was friends of ours that were passed right through, going through the same process, but they were white, coming from a European country, not even living, openly admitting that they live separately in different homes in different towns, and walked right through these, but not being flagged, not being doubted. Well, I went to a migrant justice protest and marched in it and was happy to do it and really enjoyed it, and it felt good, the energy, and that I was doing something good. And just by coincidence, the very next day, immigration and FBI show up on my doorstep and have to go through a bunch of questions and being sat down and having to answer them for a few meetings before they finally eventually let her get her green card and gave us the go. And it's just frustrating that even when I don't do something wrong, I'm always made if you think I did something, I feel guilty. I feel like I need to apologize. I feel like I have to apologize for being me. I have to apologize for being different, feeling different, looking different. Something she's going for her citizenship, and something I'd noticed that in the history for citizenship, for the history part of the 100 questions that they ask, the only two things that they asked in that 100 questions of history for the U.S. history for your citizenship here is, one question is, who lived here before the European settlers came? It was just Native people. That's the answer. They were here first. And then the second acknowledgement is, name one Native American Indian tribe. So out of the 100 questions, those are the only two to look at that my people get to live in this country. That this is our land. This is where we're from. And this is all you see. This is, people coming in here. This is all you expect them to know. Like, that reminds me that when I was in school, it was a writing teacher or English teacher or something, heard me and listened, and how I said that there's nothing here that talks about my people. It's all white culture. I feel like the idea of my people and I are nothing more than like a myth in Greek mythology, that we're looked at like it doesn't exist, like Santa Claus. Here in Vermont, you don't have the reservations and the multitude of Native American Indians here. We're so scarce that they don't even think of us as Native. They think we're Mexican. I got constantly people talking Spanish to me and wanting to know, and things that I'm not. They think they guess that I'm everything that I'm actually am. From Filipino to Thailand to Hawaiian to Asian. Everything but Dominican, Puerto Rican, Mexican, and Native American is usually what I end up having to tell them, because they don't guess it on their own. They're like, oh yeah, oh, I can see it now. And it's just the constant, it's constant in my life. And I try to live my life away from that. The way that it's affected me is, I don't let a lot of people in. I've moved back here in 2017, and I don't even really know my neighbors. I'm very active. I'm busy. I'm constantly going, doing things with my kids, and if I'm not doing that, then I'm working till, yeah, I run my own business, so I work hard, and constantly mountain biking, hiking, disc golf, anything that puts me in the woods, anything that's really active with my kids. And it doesn't put me around a lot of other people to get to know them and let them in, because I don't know who and how to feel about a lot of people. And and being that I've lived in fact, there's somebody in this room right now that lives just right around the corner from me, and we've lived here the same amount of time, and they're just realizing that I lived around the corner just this few months ago. Didn't know that I lived walking distance and never saw me, didn't know I existed. And that's how busy I stay and how separated I keep myself from everybody else, just so that I feel safe.
Do you mind if we ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Right now? Okay. So our theme today is about health and wellness. And I'd like to hear about how all of these things that you've experienced has impacted your health and your overall wellness. If you could speak to that a little bit for me. I can only imagine. And I want to know.
I spent a lot of it part of it's fear, scared, alone, not being seen, accepted, battling depression, pretending that it's not there. We're working hard to pass through all the things that I feel are my obstacles and things holding me back. And, I'm very driven and stubborn, and I don't give up and push on no matter how bad it hurts. And I do have weak moments where I don't know how I do it, how to keep going. I guess you need those moments to regroup and ground yourself, and then push. Keep winning. I'm good at winning. Not giving up. Staying for the long game. There's one more thing that I didn't touch on yet, but I had a relationship within the last couple of years that I was swept off my feet. And I wasn't expected to, because I was never looking for a partner, and they made me feel in a way that I hadn't before, and so I was impressed. But as time went on, at first they seemed like an advocate and understood white privilege, and would try to stand for me and fight for me, knowing that my brown skin had its things that come with it, and that they were white. And they always said, let me do the talking, because I got this. And I'll be listened to, I'll be heard. Well, eventually that shifted and that changed to in a negative way, where you're brown, people aren't going to listen to you. And I've got this. People will hear me. So it was like turned into a threat. And it was used in a way to talk to authorities, to call security on me when they didn't get their way and I didn't do what they wanted, that they used it to hurt me. And Yeah, there's so many people that don't understand white privilege and deny it and say and don't understand what it means and think that they work just as hard as everybody else, that they didn't get anything given to them for free. And that's not what it's about. And then there's others that do understand it and they advocate and they try to understand, they're empathetic. And then there's those that understand it, but they use it for abuse, to use the power. You know, there's, within the last few years, you know, I've done security right out of high school, bouncing, because I've always wanted to protect people. And right up until COVID came, I kind of retired a little bit, still do it time to time. But one of the last incidents I had was in Barrie, and a former security guy that used to work for the same bar came with a couple other guys with the intent of taking me out because I suspended a guy that was a known drug dealer and he punched somebody in front of me, and I told him that you could take 2 weeks off, and they didn't like that. So when the 2 weeks were up, they came in force with a group. A couple of them, you know, 260-pound in-shape men known for steroids, fighting all the time. The other guy was my size, and they came there to hurt me. And I held my own. I was the last man standing. I got hit in the head with a weapon while I was wrapped up with another guy, hit like 6 times by a monster beast of a guy, and it cut my head open. I needed stitches. The cops came, ambulance came, and a lot of cops standing outside. And instead of protecting me, seeing that I was the one that was assaulted, and I didn't throw any punches, I just defended myself, they let the guy that hit me with a weapon stand there with the group of them, mock me as I'm leaving the EMS, saying that I'm not taking a ride to the hospital, that I'll get myself there. And he's sitting there like, oh, did you get a boo-boo? Can I get some of this snow for your boo-boo? And just, you know, like ridiculing me, just coming at me verbally, and the cops just stand there and smile. And then as I get to the top of the stairs to go back in to finish the night, my shift, because that's what I do, work through the pain, I turn around and go, look, all I did was my job. I didn't throw one punch. All I did was my job. And one of the cops stepped forward and said, you shut your mouth. What are you, in grade school? You're gonna sit there and run your mouth? I'm like, I didn't realize I was running my mouth. I was just saying that I did this peacefully. But they were pretty quick to step forward and try to put me in my place and shut up. But we're okay with him standing there, 260 pounds of juiced up steroid muscle. And it was okay for him to sit there and try to intimidate me and mock me. And that, you know, I had had the same incident kind of happen 20 years before that with the same police force, where the bully, big man, I didn't want to fight. I was tired of fighting, and I told him, like, you hit me, I'm not doing anything. I'm going to the cops because I'm tired of fighting all the time. And same thing happened then. I thought maybe 20 years later something was different, and it's not different. The same thing still happened.
Thank you. As you know, we are collecting these truths. We will write a report with recommendations to the state of Vermont. What would you like to see happening?
I would like more to be taught in schools about Native peoples. To not be thought of and felt like a myth and a legend, something that is of the past. You know, because that one teacher that I talked to, she actually taught a class on her own, took it upon herself to teach, and she even let me come up with the curriculum. And I love that. I thank them for the support, some of the support that I did get. You know, they really stood strong and taught a class because I mentioned it. And I chose Leonard Peltier because nobody had ever heard of Leonard Peltier. And they taught that story in the class, and all the students got to know that. They wouldn't have known otherwise. And it showed a heavy injustice, if anybody knows the story of how the legal system and how they really did something wrong there. And you know, I wish that more would be taught in schools. I wish that there would be more training with authorities on how they deal with race. I wish the people that take these positions were vetted better. And I know it's hard to find, that it's easy to hide. But then when these incidents do happen, that it gets recorded, that other officers don't allow it to happen, and something gets done about it. And that there's somebody that's in my position when they've been done wrong, and local authorities don't want to do something about it, that they can go to speak to somebody that something can be done, that there's an outlet for them, that they feel safe and not feel like a target because they stood up and wanted to be heard and wanted justice to happen. You know, and I don't know what I can say about immigration and the way they treat, you know, because there's, you know, who do they answer to? Who watches them and keeps them flying straight? I think there's too many things that people do and they don't have anybody to answer to, and there's nobody to correct them. There's not enough of us here to make enough noise to be heard, to make a difference in the areas that need to be things made different. It's easy to be like, oh, that's just one situation. That's just one occasion. We really don't need to put the attention there because that rarely happens. You know, I've recently refereed a soccer tournament that's put on annually for the justice migrant workers. And there's 300 players, 20 teams, and it was beautiful. The food, the vendors, the energy, the passion for the sport. And I love soccer. I'm pretty crazy about it, so I did it. I couldn't speak Spanish, and I didn't understand what they were saying, and I made wrong calls. I got so mad, and I told them I couldn't speak Spanish. And then they thought I was really messing with them, and go like, yeah, he's playing with us. But I wasn't, but I still loved it, even when they got upset with me. It was a beautiful thing. And then the championship team that won it all turned out to, I knew the guys. I practice on the same soccer field with my kids that they do in their different net in Montpelier, and that they were from my area. And I went to a social dance later, and they were there, and it felt good to be around these people, and that they're here, right here in my community, and there's a lot of them out there. And not once have I been hurt by people of color here. And there's a lot of them here, you just don't see them. And they haven't done anything to hurt me in life. And I've had a lot of hurt here in this state. And all the hurt come from white people that don't accept and don't understand. But yet there's so much fear towards people of color about that they're dangerous. And I'm sure some of us can be dangerous. I know I can be. I'm capable of being dangerous, but that's not who I am. But to be treated like I'm always dangerous, or somebody else that looks like me is always dangerous. But yet, all the people that are responsible for hurting me are white people. But yet, I still love everybody. And I don't dislike or hate anybody because they're white.
Okay, thank you guys so much for that. and your courage and everything. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. Okay, guys, we have about one more minute, and then we're going to get started again. Thank you guys all again for your patience. Couple announcements. We are running a little bit behind, but lunch will be immediately after this. Also, if you do happen to need to leave earlier, just be gentle with the door as it shuts a little hard, you know? So just if you are leaving while someone's speaking, just be a little gentle with the door. And again, thank you all for coming today and sharing this space with us.
Yeah, I can scooch around. I think I'm okay. Okay, ready? I know, I'm already, I can't even get through a word. My name is Heather. I'm here with my son, Tyler. We are here today to tell the truth of a charismatic, intelligent, fun, compassionate, strong young woman. We are here to speak the truth of a daughter, a sister, and of a beautiful soul. We are here to tell Izzy's truth. Isabel Jean, or Izzy as her family calls her, was born on January 8th, 2010. As she grew, she displayed her outgoing, energetic, silly, creative, and caring nature to everyone she crossed paths with. From baseball to gymnastics to football and figure skating, Izzy wanted to try it all, and boy, she did. However, even with all of the support and the love from her family, all of the activities, all of the joys in her life, she would, at a very young age, begin her difficult journey with mental health. You see, Izzy was so talented and so smart. And so good at so many things. But she did have a weakness. Around first grade, we began to notice that she struggled to regulate her emotions, especially when she was sad, angry, or scared. There would be outbursts, sometimes crying, sometimes angry. And she would have a difficult time calming down. I would get a call from the school and I have to go get her. We didn't understand why she displayed this behavior because she never did this at home. The following year, Izzy was placed on an IEP in hopes that we could access more resources and help for her. Soon she was assigned a one-on-one aide. When we told the school we did not need this, we were told we had no choice. It was at this point that Izzy began to feel not good enough, not normal. And she got so upset at the fact that she didn't know or understand what was even happening. She often broke down and asked me, "What's wrong with me? Why can't I control it when it happens?" It was bad enough that Izzy was made to have a one-on-one. It was worse when other students would then begin teasing her for it. And it became even worse when her one-on-one aides kept changing. She would no sooner get used to one and feel comfortable, and they would switch jobs or schools, and a new one would be assigned. This caused Izzy to no longer want to open up, as she felt they wouldn't be around long enough to really care about her anyway. Eventually, Izzy was placed on medication, hoping to help regulate her emotions. She also began counseling and therapy, but no amount of medicine or therapy would stop the bullying, the teasing, or the inactions of the educational system to help stop any of it. There were never any consequences to the ones causing the abuse. Izzy couldn't understand why nothing was being done, and neither could we. Things became so mentally difficult for Izzy that she was eventually placed in alternative schools. However, the bullying never stopped, and neither did the inactions of the education system. Izzy was taunted daily at school. She was added to group chats where she was subject to extreme and harsh cruelty. Izzy tried so hard to be able to cope, including more intense therapy, new psychiatry, new medications. She would take screenshots of the bullying messages. We would show them multiple times to the school, and yet still nothing was ever done. Izzy's mental health kept diminishing. She felt like nothing was working, like no one was listening, like no one outside her family even cared. I remember the summer before her freshman year. It was the summer of 2024. Izzy's sister got married, and she got to be the maid of honor. I hadn't seen her so happy in such a long time. She was excited to be starting high school, tried her best to have a positive attitude about the upcoming year. I remember her saying, "I'm going to succeed and I'm not going to let anyone stop me." Unfortunately, as soon as school began, it was the same thing all over again. More bullying, more of nothing being done. Even though getting through each day was a struggle, Izzy still fought hard. She still woke every day and took that ride to school, knowing full well what lay ahead. We had exhausted what little resources were available to us, but she kept fighting, and we all kept fighting for her. This was until the day of Friday the 13th, September 2024. The day that yet another bullying incident took place at school, and that one would be her last. That day, Izzy decided the only way to make it stop and end her pain was to end it herself. She spent 2 days in the hospital before taking her last breath on September 15th, 2024. The day our world was turned upside down, the day we all felt the worst pain we've ever felt in our lives. And every day since, we relive that pain over and over. Every time we hear a certain song, see a dragonfly, some dandelions, or think of guinea pigs, we are reminded of Izzy and the love we have for her and the pain we feel without her. Vermont needs more youth mental health programs and services. Vermont schools need more youth mental health support workers, and Vermont needs to pass the revised bill of HB 130 to help eliminate harassment, hazing, and bullying, and have at least one employee specialized to handle these specific concerns. Vermont needs to make the same level of mental health treatment options available to low-income and single-parent families as is available to higher-income families. Vermont needs to realize that the 3 suicides that I know of from August 2024 to February 2025 of 3 young girls, Nevaeh, age 12, Amalia, age 12, Nevaeh, age 13, and my Isabel, age 14. Is 3 suicides too many in 6 months? Now, Tyler has something he would like to add.
So my name's Tyler. I'm Isabel's older brother. Isabel was not just my little sister, she was my best friend. We spent almost every waking second together when I wasn't running off hanging with my friends. Despite her being much, much younger than me, she could still, she could hang. It's been almost a year without Isabel. And I can remember being in that hospital and getting that call like it was yesterday. It's been a very hard topic for me to talk about, which has led to me feeling very alone, even though I have such a strong set of supports and family and friends and great people in my life, which is just how Izzy felt. I think that just goes to show that no matter how much support there is out there, if you're not able to, really let yourself and allow yourself to access it, then you're not able to get the help. I think now more than ever, with everything that's going on in the world, in everyone's day-to-day lives, we need to take that extra step to try and be kind to others. It can really go a long way for some people. There's been huge cuts made to a lot of the mental health programs in Vermont recently, as I'm sure everybody knows. And this is leading to an even more lack of resources than there was before. I think bullying has affected almost every kid in public schooling, and many outside of public schooling as well. Whether you've been bullied, you've been a bully, it's widely accepted and considered common in schools. It's considered that kids are just being kids. But unfortunately, kids are losing their lives because of it. I'd like to share a story that I have about Izzy, just to kind of talk a little bit about who she was. I can remember being on a family trip to Lake Dunmore, and I was playing on the dock, and I had dropped my phone in the water, and I had ran up to the camp, very, very upset about it, and kind of just with I'm not even going to try and get an attitude. The water was freezing cold. I was not jumping in there. And I'm sitting up at the cabin pouting about how I just lost everything on my phone. Sure enough, not even a few minutes later, Izzy comes running up the hill with the biggest smile on her face, happy to tell me about how she jumped in and saved my phone. I don't know how she did it, but she was always trying to go above and beyond to do kind deeds for anybody, not just her family, peers, strangers, anybody. I believe that enforcing stricter rules in schools and having stricter laws around bullying, harassment, and hazing could give a lot of kids a much greater chance at overcoming, whatever they might be dealing with themselves. I think mental health needs to be highlighted a lot more in schools. We're kind of all told in school that we have this phone number we can call whenever we're having a hard time, but that's really where the conversation ends, at least from my personal experiences. And I think that it needs to be more widely accepted and talked about. Just so, people can kind of find some sense of connection, maybe with someone sharing their personal experience, some sense of community, and not feel so alone. Mental health matters.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Tyler. But Heather, this is not where your story is at only, right? We've talked a little bit about the interactions with the systems itself. Do you want to share a little bit about the whole thing as well, or it's okay if you don't?
You mean as far as like
Just the actual system, like with the school, not just with Easy, but with all of your kids and the advocacy
all
that
of my
you've had to
kids
do?
have definitely struggled at some point or time with some mental health issues, myself included. Right now, we are beyond struggling with our mental health. I feel like the biggest obstacle I had as far as Izzy, and probably with the others too, is the schools. The schools, I don't know how many times I heard her be told by the principal or the teacher or whoever, just ignore them. Just ignore them. Which is so much easier said than done when you're a 13, 14-year-old kid. The countless meetings and trips and correspondence with the schools, begging them to do something. I don't know how many times after being poked and poked and poked, when Izzy would react or have a big reaction, she would get sent home from school. She would miss out, but yet the kids that were tormenting her every day still got to remain. And still got to, and she never understood that. She never understood why she was being punished. And she just stopped feeling like school was a safe place to get help. And when you're not at home, you're pretty much at school. I agree with Tyler. Mental health in the schools is, and then if kids are cruel, period, sometimes. And they hear that you're seeing a counselor or a therapist, and they tease you about that. And everybody's always afraid to talk about what they're going through or how they're feeling. Izzy was very open with all of us. She was open with her counselor. She was open with the therapist, the psychiatrist. Always very open with us. But when she wasn't at home, she didn't have that. There was nobody giving her that sense of security. And when she would go to the adults that were in charge that she was supposed to go to, they would do nothing. I don't know how many times we reported incidences and showed proof and evidence and everything of what was happening, and nothing ever got done. We never even received a letter. There was never a note sent to all parties involved. There was never once any kind of investigation done on any of the incidences. But part of it was on me too, because I wasn't aware of what the rules, protocols, and things were until after we lost her, unfortunately. If I had known that those things were supposed to be done by the school, then I would have been able to bring it to attention much sooner. But I didn't know that's what the protocol was. I didn't know we were supposed to receive a letter. I didn't know there was supposed to be an investigation every time. And I do now. And my only goal now is to try to help bring change so that other families and parents don't have to lose their child. She'll never graduate. She'll never get engaged. I see friends of mine like when the other day posted that their little sister got engaged. She's only a couple years older than Izzy. You know, Izzy was, she's probably 18, 19 now. And I was so excited at first, and then immediately went to the, it's not there. She'll never have children. She'll just never. When things like this happen, it takes away from a lot more people than just the victim. Because there's so many things that we don't get to participate with her in her life.
Heather, thank you. And that's actually what I was going to ask you. A lot of times as mothers, we really want to focus all of our energy on our children, obviously, and fight for them as you fought for Izzy, as you fought for all your children. And I was wondering if you could tell us about what that meant to you, and what impact that had on your health and your well-being, to have to be fighting so hard only to have her taken away.
It was already difficult on my health and well-being because in December of 2023, I was diagnosed with metastatic brain cancer and underwent brain surgery. And that was another thing that added to Izzy's mental health. She was very worried about me. And so I don't want to say that I didn't see this coming, but at the time she really seemed happy. Like, just, I guess it was pretty unexpected. And now my biggest goal is to just do as much as I can in her name and honor her as much as I can while I'm still here to do so. But yeah, my mental health is not great right now. I'm not gonna lie, it's not. But my 3 older kids, we're all very close, and I spend days at their house, nights at their house, and I cling to that for now. But it has made me, and I was already a paranoid mom, not wanting them to do anything dangerous, no cliff jumping, what, are you crazy? But since Izzy, I don't want my kids doing anything or going anywhere. I'm so afraid.
Have you encountered any other obstacles in terms of your health, in the systems that are in place to protect you? Or is there any place?
I don't think I've really encountered any obstacles. Not necessarily. Or at least I can't at the moment think straight. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, I need a break, huh? Yeah.
I'm gonna.
You got anything?
I'm gonna take. I guess I'm gonna.
What did he do? Take both the waters?
Okay. So that was our truth telling for today. We want to close this out. We're going to break bread together. I'm sure everybody's hungry. Art is still available. I see people are doing that. And I just want to close us out with a word from each of us in this room. Just one word. on what you're taking away from this moment. Just one word. I'm going to start over on this side, if that's okay. You guys are going to start.
Power.
Thank you. Power.
Power.
I heard you. I'm going to repeat it for the camera. What do you got? Compassion. Love. Thank you. Change. Yeah. Connection. Possibility. Courage. Community.
Hold.
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 Hold. Truth. Caring. Kindness. Empathy.
Hope.
Hope.
Healing. Healing.
Healing.
I have this single that's more inside.
You can say it. You can say any word that comes to your mind.
Okay. I'm also going
Hope.
with hope. Neighbors.
Neighbors. You got strength. Motivated. Accountability. Ancestors. Healing.
Commitment.
Commitment.
Change.
Change. Love. We heard difficult things and everybody came out with a new word to change the pain. Thank you. Let's go break bread. Thank you.